Harsh insults fly as a healer is rejected for being a weakness, sparking a dark vow of total destruction against everyone present. While the scene shifts to a bright, clear sky over a school, just as the school bell rings to signal the start of classes, causing a student to flinch when he is suddenly called trash, which leads to bullies mockingly ordering him to fetch them some juice. And he grips his desk in silent, repressed frustration before forcing a hollow smile and accepting the task. As coins are tossed into his hand like he is a servant, leaving him to wander through a classroom he finds utterly lifeless. Until a girl interrupts the group to question the ongoing bullying, sharply criticizing the older students for their immature and shameful actions. Though the bullies quickly hide behind the facade of being best friends, prompting the girl to ask the boy for the truth, to which he dejectedly confirms their lie to avoid further trouble, leaving her to stare at him in stunned silence. As she sighs and asks if he truly accepts this treatment, while a dark, empty look settles deep within the boy's eyes, and he feigns ignorance as a bully maintains a possessive grip, finally walking out of the room while the girl watches him leave. A grim internal monologue categorizes the different roles people play in the cycle of bullying, emphasizing that every witness and participant shares a burden of responsibility for the outcome, while many students choose to believe they are merely innocent outsiders looking in. As the victim quietly makes his way toward the edge of the school rooftop, gripping the cold metal railing while contemplating his own sense of destruction, yet he quickly shifts his perspective and refuses to accept the blame for his state, looking out over the cityscape as he declares the world itself to be the broken one, before offering a final, hollow farewell to a society that failed him, stepping over the ledge as his feet lose their grip on solid ground. As he plunges backward through the air while contemplating his desire to stop living, thinking about how his tormentors would never understand the depth of his pain, causing the boy to squeeze his eyes shut as the rushing wind envelops him, falling further away from a life he no longer wishes to endure, until his figure becomes a small speck against the backdrop of the school building, and everything fades into a distorted blur of motion and blinding light. Shortly before his eyes slowly begin to flicker open once again, prompting a look of utter bewilderment as he hears voices celebrating an apparent success, as he finds himself standing in the center of a massive, ornate throne room, while a king seated on a high throne welcomes the group as legendary heroes, finally revealing that his entire class has been summoned to this strange new world. The boy stares in disbelief as the word heroes echoes through the chamber, sweating nervously while wondering how his entire class ended up in this place, as Siki casts a suspicious glare toward the figure apologizing for their sudden arrival, prompting the others to turn their heads and scan the unfamiliar environment. While the sprawling kingdom of Greyberg sits outside the castle walls locked in war, as the king explains that ancient texts promised the summon would have exceptional powers, causing Seiki to furrow his brow in confusion at the mention of status screens, standing defiantly as he accuses the royal court of committing a mass kidnapping, suddenly reacting with alarm when a violent magical explosion shatters the floor nearby, recoiling in shock as strange vapors rise from the site of the impact. While the king extends his hand to demonstrate the very nature of magic, leaving the rest of the class trembling as they struggle to accept the impossible. As the protagonist shivers while the weight of being in another world sinks in, prompting Saeki to grit his teeth while the king offers to show them proof, until a classmate urgently calls out to Saeki to stop his aggressive questioning, as a calm student points out the futility of fighting while surrounded by armed guards. Supported by two girls who tell Saeki to stay quiet and listen, causing him to eventually relent with a frustrated click of his tongue. As the king looks down from his high throne and promises no harm, yet Saeki continues to protest that they are just ordinary high school students. The king notes that every student has been granted an extraordinary occupation upon their arrival, while a royal lady explains that speaking the word status will reveal their hidden abilities, prompting Seiki to summon a magical screen that identifies him as a high-level sage, which causes the court to erupt in excitement over his top-tier attributes and priest skills. As the king leans forward in shock at the discovery of such a powerful hero, while another student displays an even more incredible status screen featuring the legendary Excalibur skill, leaving Masamune trembling in silence as he realizes the sheer scale of their powers, watching his classmates celebrate their newfound fortune while his own anxiety continues to mount, until he finally gathers his courage and whispers the command to see his own fate, revealing a screen that lists him as a simple healer with the title of Reincarnated. which leaves him sweating profusely as he compares his low stats to his peers, focusing intensely on the humble occupation that has been assigned to his soul. As he questions whether this underwhelming role is truly supposed to be a blessing, nervously approaching the royal lady to ask for clarification on his specific job class, only for her to maintain a polite smile while inquiring about his results, before her expression suddenly shifts into a cold and judgmental glare, as she dismissively explains that healers are nothing more than a basic recovery role, leaving him shattered when she bluntly declares his class to be the absolute weakest, prompting Saeki to mockingly slap his shoulder while laughing at his uselessness. As the bully loudly questions the group if such a weakling is even necessary, one student steps forward to challenge Seiki for being unnecessarily cruel to Masamune, prompting the bully to turn back with a defiant and challenging glare. While an elderly advisor approaches Masamune to ask why his status indicates he is reincarnated, as the other students watch the interrogation with a mix of curiosity and disdain, causing Masamune to clench his fists as he stammers through a nervous explanation, while the royal lady watches from the side with a cold and judgmental expression, leading the boy to reflect on the painful memory of jumping from a roof, until the old man closes his eyes in a solemn gesture of understanding, before the lady interrupts the moment to call everyone over for further instructions, leaving Masamune in disbelief at how easily his tragic past is brushed aside. As she explains that everyone will be enrolled in school to train for combat, gesturing toward a large magic circle on the floor meant for their transportation, which gives Psyche another chance to mock the boy for his weak healer class, while a sense of hopelessness takes hold when Masamune realizes his misery continues, as the bully walks away with a final insult regarding his suicidal nature, highlighting the fact that he is still trapped in a cycle of abuse, prompting the healer to quietly ask if tormenting him is truly that entertaining, until Psyche aggressively grabs the boy's tie and demands he repeat himself, leading the bully to pause in confusion at the boy's unwavering defiance, while his expression breaks into a cold sweat as he stares back in silence. Masamune stands his ground and flatly refuses to go, shocking the onlookers with his sudden resistance, while the royal lady stands tall as she prepares to address his defiance, questioning the healer's sudden change in attitude with a calm but piercing gaze, revealing that she had already decided to transport him to a separate location. As the other students listen in confusion to the talk of a random security system, leading Masamune to momentarily believe he is being given a second chance, until the lady harshly asks what exactly he thinks he is misunderstanding, clarifying that the teleportation system is intended strictly for the kingdom's benefit, explaining that this powerful tool exists solely to protect the lives of her countrymen, before exploding into a scream of pure rage at summoning a weak healer, demanding to know how they can explain such a disappointment to their people, while Siki mockingly places a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder from behind, whispering a cruel insult about Masamune being nothing more than absolute trash, as the sound of the boy's racing heart begins to throb in his ears, and the royal lady orders him to pay for wasting their hope with his life, prompting an intense change in Masamune's expression as his internal tension reaches a peak, leading him to silently vow the total destruction of the Heartless Kingdom, while he further resolves to turn the entire country into nothing but ash, promising to eliminate every single person who has ever wronged him, fueled by a cold and absolute determination to have his final revenge. Masamune lets out a blood-curdling scream, swearing to kill everyone who has wronged him, while a glowing teleportation circle activates beneath his feet as the royal lady looks on, leading to a sudden and absolute darkness that swallows his vision entirely, until a single footstep echoes against the cold and cracked stone floor of a new location, as he wanders aimlessly through a narrow and jagged cavern while questioning his current whereabouts, before pausing in the gloom to summon his status window with a quiet command, focusing his gaze as the glowing interface reflects sharply within his wide-eyed stare, revealing a dismal set of base statistics that confirm his position as the weakest person present, highlighting a peculiar disorder known as Otherworld Obsession Syndrome within his personal status menu, prompting a dark and cynical smirk to creep across his face as he laughs at his own misfortune, while he remains standing in silence with a look of hollow disbelief at his desperate situation, until he discovers several large wooden treasure chests lined up against a stone wall, holding a torch high while warily approaching the containers and keeping an eye out for mimics, only to find that the first chest he opens is completely and utterly empty, as he casts a skeptical glance toward the remaining boxes left in the dark room, deciding to be thorough and proceeding to open every single one of the wooden containers. finding a lone, ornate small bottle resting at the bottom of one of the chests, as he carefully lifts the container to examine the mysterious liquid while fearing it might be poison. When a sudden and demanding voice in his head commands him to drink the contents immediately, causing him to spin around in terror and demand to know who else is hiding in the shadows. Masamune flinches as the mysterious voice continues to probe his internal desire for absolute strength. While he stands alone in the dungeon chamber, being commanded to drink every last drop, peering through his fingers with a face slicked in cold sweat from the overwhelming pressure, as he considers the tiny glass vial and wonders if he is truly losing his mind. Remembering the smug and hateful faces of those who look down on him with such cruelty, tightening his grip on the container as a surge of desperate resolve takes hold of him. Reflecting on his painful past life, where he was constantly tormented and bullied by his peers, before finally popping the cork on the mysterious bottle with a sharp and decisive motion, staring at the liquid with wide and frantic eyes as he prepares for the unknown, bringing the vessel to his mouth as the voice continues its persistent and dark whisper, tilting his head back to gulp down the contents in one single and forced swallow, as a sudden and violent sensation causes his pupils to dilate in a moment of agony, throwing the glass container aside to shatter against the stone floor into many jagged pieces. While he clutches his wounded arm in pain and decides the gamble was worth the risk. Meanwhile, the sun shines over the sprawling and prestigious National Academy of Aries Greyberg, where students gather outside their dormitories to gossip about the latest news on the campus. As a group of classmates wanders through the hallways discussing the nature of dangerous beauty, while one student looks on with a grim expression and warns about falling too deep, questioning whether certain stories are truly as funny as they seem to the other students, prompting a heated exchange regarding the whereabouts and fate of their missing classmate, Hidaka. One classmate mocks another's perceived weakness with a cold and condescending gaze, while the target of his frustration looks on with a visibly shaken and nervous expression. As the conversation shifts toward Kita, while the group continues their heated discussion in the hallway, where a lone girl stands her ground and accuses the boys of being complicit in bullying, leading to a firm and quiet denial from a girl who refuses to accept the blame. Before the students begin to disperse through a stone archway to leave the argument behind them, dismissive words echoing under the open sky about refusing to take responsibility for their missing peer. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon depths where Masamune lies motionless on the floor beside open chests, until a sudden flinch breaks the silence as his consciousness slowly begins to return to him, revealing the shattered remains of the empty potion bottle scattered across the hard stone ground. As he pushes himself up into a crouch and wonders if he simply fainted from the agony, clutching his head in confusion while trying to determine if the elixir had any effect at all, noticing a strange and newfound clarity in his vision as he scans the empty room, walking past the rolling glass vial while feeling a sense of shame for blacking out, as his attention shifts toward the one remaining treasure chest left unopened in the chamber. Peering at the wooden container with a dull expression and very little hope for a reward, reaching out to grasp the lid and slowly pulling it open with a distinct creak, only for a violent and jagged explosion of dark energy to suddenly burst forth from within, forcing a guttural scream from his mouth as the shadowy power surges into the air, while dark and distorted symbols hover ominously above the open chest in the heavy silence. Masamune screams in agony as blood drips from his mangled and severely injured arm, while he retreats behind a stone pillar to hide from the source of the attack, revealing a terrifying mimic monster with rows of sharp teeth and a massive tongue, forcing the boy to sprint away as his severed limb sprays blood behind him, leaving the creature standing on its long legs as it watches its prey flee, as its clawed feet remain rooted to the floor of the dark stone corridor, before Masamune kicks a nearby treasure chest away in a blind fit of rage, stumbling through the silent hallways of the dungeon while trying to find safety, where he desperately casts healing magic repeatedly on his gruesome and bloody wounds, falling to his knees and striking the cold floor while cursing the mimic's existence, until his status screen appears to remind him of his weak human class and limited mana. Staring at his ruined flesh and questioning his ability to survive against such beasts, noticing a sudden change in his vision that makes him pause in confusion, as a notification reveals a new unique skill granted by divine protection called Mischievous Reversal, which explains that the power was obtained from the secret medicine he previously consumed, leading him to realize that the agony of the elixir was not in vain. Reading the description of how the ability can turn healing effects into lethal outcomes, prompting him to tentatively prepare his magic to test the reversal's true potential. Hearing a mysterious voice confirm that his healing spell has transformed into waves of erosion. Finally understanding that his recovery magic has been inverted into a tool for absolute destruction, Masamune sits against the dungeon wall, contemplating the destructive nature of the waves of erosion. While his eyes widen as the reality of his newfound strength settles in, prompting him to return to the chamber to face the mimic that maimed him. Although he hesitates, considering if avoiding the chest would ensure his safety, he looks down at his trembling fingers while nursing a deep-seated urge for revenge, whispering a dark wish for the monster's death as he prepares to strike. Before casting his inverted magic to release a devastating aura of pure destruction, which catches the mimic within a violent and corrosive flow of energy. As the creature's physical form begins to crumble and dissolve into nothingness, leaving him to stand firm as a massive explosion marks the end of the battle. Laughing breathlessly while acknowledging the incredible potency of his reverse skills, cheering loudly and raising his fists in a moment of pure triumph, until a sudden series of system notifications alert him to choose his spoils, allowing him to reflect on the goddess's divine protection while standing amidst the rubble, where he browses through rewards including camouflage and an infinite storage skill, ultimately deciding that the spatial chest is his most immediate and convenient asset, though he reels in shock upon discovering the defeated mimic was level 500. Just as multiple level-up notifications begin to flood his vision in rapid succession, making him wonder if the constant stream of experience alerts will ever stop appearing. Finally noticing that even his basic healing magic has evolved through this immense power surge, Masamune marvels at a system notification confirming his healing magic has reached its maximum level, while he becomes slightly annoyed as a flood of similar messages announce several other maxed out skills, prompting him to open his status screen to see his level has skyrocketed to 150. Although he remains deeply skeptical about how his current strength compares to the world standard, wondering if his former classmates have also reached such heights or perhaps even surpassed him already. He decides to put his doubts aside and turns to leave the room to continue exploring, until he comes to a halt before a set of massive and intricately carved double doors. Sensing a powerful and ominous aura emanating from the chamber that lies just beyond them, he attempts to shove the heavy stones open by hand, but finds they are completely immovable. Pausing to reconsider his strategy when it becomes clear that physical strength alone will not suffice, before hitting upon a sudden realization as he contemplates using his newfound magical abilities to proceed, activating his waves of erosion to directly target the structural integrity of the stone barrier. Watching with astonishment as the heavy doors dissolve into nothingness without him even touching them, he steps into the next area only to stop dead in his tracks from sheer shock, as he spots a glowing and ornate staff hovering mysteriously in the middle of the wide chamber, breaking into a joyful sprint toward the floating treasure while comparing the scene to a game, feeling a surge of pure excitement at the thought of finally acquiring some legendary loot, until a sudden and violent impact nearby causes him to recoil in a state of alarm, while the entire floor begins to shake and rumble with a terrifying intensity, prompting him to look up as a massive crack splits across the ceiling above his head. Masamune stares in disbelief as the ceiling cracks and heavy debris starts to fall, when a massive armored guardian suddenly crashes through the roof to protect its treasure. The towering knight prepares its weapon with a focused and intimidating presence, swinging its massive blade down with enough force to shatter the stone floor. Masamune braces himself against the impact while noting his body feels much tougher now. He quickly conjures a defensive magical circle to safeguard against a direct hit. Noticing the opportunity when the knight's heavy sword becomes wedged in the floor, he lunges forward with his hand outstretched to cast his powerful waves of erosion. The destructive magic begins to eat away at the guardian's thick metal armor, causing the ornate plating to crumble and fall off in large rusted fragments. Masamune smiles to himself, wondering if the battle was really that easy. As the damaged knight falls to its knees while its structure continues to disintegrate, the guardian's helmet tilts forward as it begins to exert its remaining strength. Masamune's expression shifts to shock as he senses a sudden and rapid movement. He is sent flying across the room and slammed violently into the hard wall, coughing up blood as he realizes the sheer power of the knight's physical strike. The guardian stands back up despite the damage, ready to continue the fight, quickly casting a healing spell to mend his broken bones and internal damage. He regains his footing and decides to unleash his full power this time, focusing his energy to release a devastating wave of erosion upon his opponent. The corrosive magic consumes the armored knight's body, dissolving the metal into black shadows. Masamune watches intently as he declares the grueling battle has finally reached its end. A massive blast detonates across the chamber, obliterating the remains of the guardian knight. Silence returns to the ruined hall as the dust settles over the shattered floor tiles. A system window confirms the enemy was a mimic and awards him a rare fabrication skill. Surveying his updated status screen, he realizes he has surged all the way to level 212. A bitter memory of being called the weakest flashes through his mind as he glares ahead. He turns his attention away from the rubble to find a way out of the depths. Reaching into the loot, he retrieves a golden staff imbued with the wrath of saints. The interface describes the staff as a powerful tool for intermediate holy light elemental magic. Deciding the staff will be useful later, he walks toward a long ladder leading upward. Over at Ares Greyberg Academy, the morning sun illuminates the grounds during combat training maneuvers. A student falls to his knees while panting heavily from a failed magical discharge. He looks up in exhaustion while struggling to regain his composure after the backfire. Lecturer Philip Battler scolds the student for his lack of focus during the unstable circle's explosion. The instructor explains that managing such immense power requires mastery even without using magic circles. He warns that failing to control this energy means certain death against the demon threat. Sweat drips from the student's face as he accepts his heavy burden of being a hero. Other trainees observe from the shade of a tree as the lecture continues across the field. A student with a cross earring watches the scene with a chillingly cold gaze. Two students sit beneath a tree, lamenting their lack of sufficient magical power. One observes a status window, concluding that magic is wasted on those without strength. They watch a fellow trainee struggle, noting he is the only one capable of magic. Reflecting on their own stats, they feel their hero titles are mere decorations. A close-up shows one student looking off to the side with a pensive expression. He closes his eyes, accepting that their inherent limitations cannot be changed. His companion's eyes narrow with a sharp, resentful focus toward the field. The sun shines over the academy towers as a quiet agreement is reached. Meanwhile, Masamune greedily gulps down the contents of a dark glass bottle. He stands in a hallway, surprised that his first taste of alcohol isn't bad. Luckily, he discovers a well-stocked pantry that resolves all concerns about food. Noticing a pair of large double doors, he pauses to consider going inside. He slowly pushes the door open and cautiously steps into the unknown. A sudden voice catches him off guard by praising his arrival in this place. An elegant man dressed in regal armor welcomes him with a sly grin. Masamune finds himself in a magnificent throne room facing the mysterious figure. He stares back with a flushed face and wide eyes, completely speechless. He realizes this hidden sanctuary is vastly different from any place he has ever seen. While the armored man asks his winged familiar how long it has been since a visitor appeared, the creature's single eye peers out as it reveals a century and a half has passed. Sheon reflects on the long passage of time he has spent in isolation. The regal man stands up from his throne and announces a celebration. Masamune's face flushes with sudden panic as the atmosphere shifts. Revealing himself as the king of snakes, Sheon draws his jagged sword. With blinding speed, Sheon lunges forward and drives his blade into the boy. Shock washes over Masamune as he realizes his stomach has been pierced. Blood drips from the young man's mouth while he stares at the floor. Sheon stands over his victim, finally recalling the thrill of a hunt. He roughly yanks the bloody blade out of the boy's abdomen. The armored man breaks into a manic laugh, savoring the lethal sensation. Clutching his wound, Masamune collapses and gasps for air in total agony. Sean laments the pathetic state of current adventurers while turning his back. Pausing for a moment, he asks if the intruder is merely a priest. The winged familiar observes that the boy was too slow to react. Sheon wonders why a lone healer would wander into his hidden domain. Meanwhile, the floating creature notes that this visitor seems incredibly strange. Struggling to survive, Masamune reaches out and touches his discarded staff. A massive beam of holy light erupts across the throne room floor. The powerful energy blast slams directly into the unsuspecting winged familiar. Sheon watches in shock as his companion vanishes in a brilliant explosion. Masamune reacts to a sudden notification sound as his survival instincts kick in. A system window appears and announces the activation of the goddess's divine protection. Meanwhile, Shaon rages at the boy for the destruction of his familiar Zuri. Masamune narrows his gaze while preparing his next massive magical offensive. He unleashes a devastating spell called Waves of Erosion from his staff. Shock covers the king's face as the dark energy fills his vision. The ground shudders under the weight of the massive magical blast. Masamune waits for the smoke to clear to confirm his enemy's status. Xion survives the blast, but his clothes and armor are shredded. The king lets out a piercing scream upon seeing his ruined weapon. He laments the loss of his precious sword as it snaps into pieces. Masamune dismissively tells the king that he is making too much of a fuss. Tension rises once more as the boy senses the king's murderous speed. Xion seethes with rage while listing the crimes the boy has committed. The king steps forward and vows that the intruder will never leave alive. Masamune desperately casts a heal spell to stabilize his condition. Xion realizes the boy's strange magic must be coming from the fallen staff. He observes the intruder and notices the lack of any magical supporting marks. The king points his broken blade and demands to know who he is. Masamune glares up and reaffirms his role as a simple healer. Xion delivers a vicious slash that sends blood spraying while mocking the intruder's secrecy. Masamune struggles on the floor as the king threatens more violence to extract the truth. The boy cries out in pain when another strike hits his already wounded body. Xion continues his verbal and physical assault by bringing up his fallen familiar's words. A sharp blade grazes Masamune's neck as the king demands to know his true intentions. Blood pools on the floor while Masamune realizes his healing magic cannot fully mend him. The king screams in disbelief that a mere healer could ever wield offensive magic. Masamune glares through the pain and stubbornly repeats his role to his tormentor. Irritation flares in the king's eyes as he reaches the limit of his patience. Xion rages at the boy's refusal to provide a name instead of just an occupation. Sweating and exhausted, Masamune doubts whether any of his words will reach the king. A memory of his former classmate's mocking face surfaces during the heat of battle. Dark determination fills the boy's eyes as he prepares to redefine his identity. Standing precariously, Masamune begins to announce his name to the waiting king. The boy looks down and declares himself as nothing more than a Neet. He vows to make that name feared across the land through his bloody revenge. Xion looks on with a confused expression and mispronounces the strange name. Masamune continues to walk forward while reaffirming his status as a healer. The boy shouts at the top of his lungs to correct the king's pronunciation. Xion stares with cold eyes and decides that this tiresome conversation is finally over. Xion suddenly declares his boredom while looking away from his battered opponent. Masamune blinks in confusion at the king's sudden change in demeanor. A devastating slash tears through the air and strikes the boy with overwhelming force. Masamune's face contorts in agony as blood sprays from his fresh wounds. Standing tall over the fallen boy, Xion coldly announces the end of their struggle. Internal dread fills Masamune as he faces his mortality before accomplishing his goals. The boy suddenly unleashes his erosion magic, catching the arrogant king completely off guard. The high, ornate ceiling of the throne room looms above the scene of the struggle. Xion collapses to the ground, coughing up blood while acknowledging Masamune's lingering strength. Looking back with a bloodied face, Masamune reflects on the king's long history and his own growth. Xion laughs weakly from the floor, mocking the boy's unexpected generosity after such a brutal fight. The dying king warns Masamune to keep his identity hidden from the rest of the world. Masamune looks down at his foe with a confused expression. Questioning the meaning of the warning, a dark silhouette depicts the legendary power and ultimate defeat of the ancient Snake King. Xion finally acknowledges Masamune's true role as a healer, while the boy breathes a sigh of relief. The king cautions that powerful magic in a low-grade vessel will make him a target for everyone. He explains that appearing weak is the only way to stay safe from those who would exploit him. Xion gazes upward with fading eyes, remarking on how the world has no place for idiots. The boy remains silent, absorbing the weight of the king's final lessons. Masamune sits quietly beside the defeated monarch and prepares to ask a final question. Xion offers to answer a final question as a reward for his defeat. He asks if Masamune has ever heard of the title God of Revenge. The boy remembers his own internal vow to take up that mantle. Masamune remains silent as he watches the king struggle on the floor. A sinister grin forms on Xion's lips as he reaches an epiphany. The king breaks into wild laughter that echoes through the silent chamber. He remarks on the nostalgia of the name while Masamune watches closely. Xion reveals the title belonged to a cursed adventurer from long ago. The dying ruler finds the coincidence fascinating as his eyes start to close. Xion asks for Masamune's real name after realizing he is using a pseudonym. The boy finally identifies himself as Hidaka Masamune with a solemn look. The king repeats the name while finding yet another link to the past. Masamune questions the king's shift in personality as a spoil window appears. Cheyenne offers a faint smile while his breathing becomes more shallow. A sudden whistling sound pulls Masamune's gaze toward a shimmering light. The legendary black blade of the king manifests as a final reward. Masamune reaches out and firmly grasps the dark textured hilt of the sword. He questions if a mere healer like himself can master such a weapon. The boy looks back at the king with newfound weight in his hands. Masamune accepts the blade as Cheyenne tells him to forget their meeting. Masamune reviews a notification window listing the high-class recovery medicine and skills gained from Mad Izuri, walking away from the fallen king of serpents. The boy notes he also inherited the unique flash skill. He pauses to stare back at the remains, questioning why the king's body has not yet disappeared. Dismissing his confusion for now, he heads toward a massive stone doorway containing an upward-leading staircase. The boy begins his long climb, vowing to find his way back regardless of the time it takes. His status screen displays a massive jump to level 697, along with various legendary titles and powerful items. To pass the time, he drinks heavily before using magic to instantly sober himself on the cold steps. The repetitive cycle of drinking and climbing continues as he wonders where the seemingly endless stairs actually lead. A sudden frantic warning voice rings out from the shadows, causing him to freeze and raise his sword. He looks over his shoulder with a confused expression, wondering if his mind is playing tricks on him. Light floods his vision as he suddenly finds himself standing in the middle of a vibrant, sun-drenched forest. The boy stands in stunned silence, his eyes widening as he realizes the dungeon has completely vanished. He scans the surrounding trees in total disbelief, certain that he was just standing on a stone staircase. A realization hits him that he must have been teleported to the surface during his ascent. Looking down at the dirt under his shoes, he recognizes the familiar, tingling sensation of spatial magic. Masamune raises his newly acquired black blade toward the sky, cheering loudly for his escape and freedom. He celebrates the start of his true adventure in this world before a sudden shout interrupts his joy. Turning around, he hears the voices of strangers nearby and realizes he is no longer alone. Three travelers emerge from the brush, with a knight lecturing a young girl about staying alert in the woods. The boy watches the group with a mixture of curiosity and caution, realizing they are the first humans he has seen. Hidden figures in the brush decide they must finish the boy off before he can report their conversation. Masamune stands with his black blade drawn, casting a dark and intimidating presence over the forest path. The dark-haired traveler raises his hand in a panic, calling the boy a pursuer and begging for dialogue. Remaining silent, the boy watches the man's desperate attempts to talk him down from a violent confrontation. With a sudden burst of speed, Masamune vanishes from his spot as the traveler shouts for him to wait. He streaks across the clearing like a shadow, moving far too fast for the humans to track him. The traveler grits his teeth in frustration, realizing he is completely unable to stop the boy's advance. A powerful blur of motion follows the boy's path as he executes a lightning-fast maneuver through the trees. Stopping abruptly, Masamune narrows his eyes with focused intent as he targets the group once more. Reappearing in a flash, the boy seizes the young girl and holds her hostage with his blade. The traveler cries out Eliza's name in terror, horrified to see his companion captured so easily. Holding his long weapon steady, Masamune warns the men to stay exactly where they are or face consequences. He expresses his irritation, noting that he has already issued multiple warnings that they chose to ignore. The traveler tries to negotiate, insisting that the boy must lower his sword before any talk can occur. Masamune points his weapon toward the knight in the distance, asserting absolute control over the entire standoff. Looking visibly shaken by the boy's prowess, Eliza admits that her group has suffered a total loss. The travelers reflect on the boy's incredible speed, noting they could not even sense his final movements. Tension hangs heavy in the air as Masamune maintains his guard, his expression set in a stern grimace. Deciding to de-escalate the situation, the boy finally agrees to lower his hostile stance and steps back. He plunges his black blade into the dirt as a sign of surrender while releasing the young girl. Masamune and Eliza exchange wary looks as they question whether the sudden peaceful gesture is a trap. Standing with his arms spread wide, the traveler promises to cease all hostilities and end the fight. The boy remains silent and watchful, his brow furrowing as he processes the man's unexpected surrender. Offering a brief and dismissive pat on the shoulder, Masamune signals that the hostage situation is over. As Eliza and her companion look on in surprise, the boy turns his back to leave. The traveler calls out for him to wait a second, stopping the boy's departure in its tracks. Masamune looks over his shoulder with an irritated glare, questioning what else they could possibly want. The dark-haired man tries to introduce himself as Jeek, but the boy immediately shuts him down. Stepping forward with a pleading expression, Eliza explains that her group desperately needs his unique skills. Jeek clarifies the situation by formally inviting the powerful youth to accompany them on their journey. Stunned by her companion's boldness, Eliza reacts with wide-eyed shock at the sudden proposal. Masamune scoffs at the idea, clearly finding the prospect of joining them to be far too troublesome. Giving a nonchalant wave of his hand, he tells them to find someone else before walking away. Jeek's eyes narrow with a cold and calculating intensity as he refuses to let his target escape. Without warning, a circle of floating fireballs manifests around the boy, forcing him to halt his retreat. A series of deafening explosions tears through the forest floor, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Masamune slides backward through the smoke, shouting for the madman to stop his reckless, magical assault. With his face twisted in anger, the boy demands to know if the traveler has lost his mind. Ignoring the protest, Jeek raises a shadowy hand to the sky to invoke an even stronger spell. A massive vortex of swirling fire erupts above a glowing magic circle, while the traveler calmly asserts his dominance. Jeek narrows his eyes and confesses that he simply wants to test the boy's hidden power. Staring back in disbelief, Masamune wonders what the man could possibly be talking about. The boy asks about his opponent's character class, while a massive fire spell swirls above. Accepting that keeping secrets is common in this world, Masamune prepares for the coming impact. A strange light begins to emanate from the boy's eyes as he activates a skill. A status window appears revealing the knight as level 48 Dragon Knight Sieg Bach. Sieg watches with a look of envy while maintaining his offensive magical stance. Focusing intently on the boy, the knight expresses his jealousy toward effortless magic use. He continues his internal monologue, questioning why the youth acts like he cannot use magic. Holding a flaming blade, Sieg prepares to unleash a devastating vortex upon his target. A system notification appears detailing the application of a soul-breaking reversal to all spells. The interface explains that the soul break skill serves as a formula for erasing magic. Reflecting on a moment of quiet contemplation, Masamune remembers his decision to test this ability. Standing before the massive inferno, he realizes this is the ideal moment for a trial. The knight pauses with a puzzled expression, trying to decipher the boy's next move. Masamune reaches out toward the swirling flames with an air of calm confidence. Thrusting his palm forward, he invokes the powerful soul break technique to disrupt the attack. The massive magic circle begins to fracture and dissolve under the boy's mysterious influence. Shock waves ripple through the air as the knight is stunned by the sudden spell cancellation. Perspiring in fear, Sieg realizes his entire magic circle has been utterly destroyed. Sieg stares in frantic disbelief while Masamune warns him not to hold a grudge. Maintaining a cold gaze, the boy reminds his opponent that he only defended himself. The blonde girl interjects with a worried expression, reminding everyone who started the fight. Suddenly, she drops down and grabs Masamune's arm while begging for him to forgive Sieg. She stands between the two, shielding the knight while calling him a precious friend. Tears well up in her eyes as she offers to do anything to spare him. A sudden flicker of memory causes Masamune's eye to widen in realization. He envisions a tall, arrogant student standing over him in a different world. The memory persists of a boy looking down with a sneer of cold superiority. A painful image of himself curled up on the floor while being tormented flashes by. A faint, mocking laugh echoes through his mind as he remembers his past trauma. Shaking off the vision, he sees the knight looking uncomfortable with his current role. The boy jerks his arm away, swearing that he will never become like Saeki. The three adventurers watch him with stunned silence as the tension suddenly shifts. As the boy begins to walk away, the knight calls out a surprising invitation. Masamune stops in his tracks and looks back with a look of utter confusion. Sieg explains that the entire confrontation was a deliberate test of the boy's extraordinary reflexes. Processing the request, Masamune repeats the word comrade while trying to understand their motives. The knight begins to reveal the truth about the secret organization they represent. Standing with his team, Sieg emphasizes that they are in desperate need of someone strong. Turning his head slightly, Masamune skeptically questions what kind of benefit he would receive from joining them. Sieg extends a hand while promising to provide wealth or anything else the boy might desire. Dismissing the offer, Masamune looks away while stating that they cannot provide what he truly wants. The blonde girl urges Sieg to stop their recruitment efforts to avoid involving him further. Before parting ways, the knight holds out his hand and asks the boy to take a small gift. He presents a detailed communication ring that allows magical contact across great distances. Looking on with a serious expression, the knight explains that no immediate decision is necessary. Masamune stares at the artifact in his hand while considering the weight of the offer. The Dragonheart organization is formally introduced with their grand goal of eradicating worldwide corruption. Focusing on his blade, Sieg recounts a tragic scene at a duke's house where everyone was killed. The boy reacts with visible distress as he processes the grim details of the massacre. Agreeing to take the ring, Masamune activates a swirling black portal that catches everyone by surprise. The blonde adventurer watches in disbelief as she recognizes the rare manifestation of dimensional storage. Seeing their shocked reactions, the boy casually asks if possessing such an ability is actually uncommon. A momentary lull occurs as the boy inquires about their upcoming travel plans. Sieg reveals that the group is currently making their way toward the territory of Grey Belka. Masamune's eyes widen in shock upon hearing that heroes were successfully summoned an entire month ago. He clenches his chin in deep thought, realizing a major discrepancy in the time passed since his arrival. Shaking off his confusion, he informs the group of his personal plan to find a nearby town. The girl identifies his destination as Rashausen and notes it will take 3 days to reach on foot. The girl realizes she still doesn't know the boy's name and asks him to share it. Fearing his true identity might be discovered in Grey Belka, he decides to use a pseudonym. Looking back with a calm expression, he introduces himself to the group as Nito. After parting ways, he walks alone under a cloudy sky while complaining about the boredom. Hours of trekking through the wilderness pass without a single interesting event occurring. A sudden rustling sound emanates from the thick grass beside the dirt path. The boy stops in his tracks and looks toward the noise with a curious glance. A pack of large white wolves emerges from the forest to surround him completely. The predatory beasts bared their fangs and growled aggressively at their lone target. Instead of being afraid, Nito breaks into a wide grin of pure excitement. He relishes the thrill of the confrontation while thinking, this is the true isekai experience. Cracking his knuckles, the boy prepares to use the opportunity to vent his frustrations. Before engaging in combat, he focuses his gaze to activate his appraisal ability. A faint sound effect triggers as he initiates the magical scan on the monsters. The interface reveals the creatures are merely level 8, which deeply disappoints him. Comparing them to the powerful knight from before, he decides to finish them off quickly. Just as he prepares to strike, a sudden shout commands him to get down. A flurry of projectile attacks streaks through the air toward the pack of wolves. The monsters are instantly torn apart by the unexpected and lethal barrage of blades. An eye widened in shock observes the sudden turn of events with total astonishment. A blonde woman in armor remarks that the encounter was a close one. She turns around with a cheerful smile and asks if the boy's all right. Nito waves his hand dismissively while secretly feeling annoyed that her help was unnecessary. He uses his appraisal skill to identify her as Sierra Eckerla, a level 32 knight. A sharp gaze focuses intensely as he evaluates the woman's impressive magical and physical stats. Sierra leans in close to his face and observes that he looks quite unhappy. A distant shout interrupts them as a carriage appears further down the dirt road. The horse-drawn wagon continues its steady approach through the quiet forest surroundings. A man with wavy hair introduces himself as a merchant named William Vector. He gestures toward his stern driver, Keith, who serves as his primary escort. Sierra officially introduces herself to the travelers, while Nito quietly offers his own fake name. The two youths sit side by side in the wagon while Sierra stares at him curiously. She comments on how peculiar his name sounds, making him feel slightly nervous and wary. The carriage wheel continues to turn as they travel further along the sunlit path. William explains that Sierra agreed to guard his goods in exchange for a free ride. Nito apologizes for the inconvenience, but the merchant welcomes the extra company on the road. The merchant expresses his admiration for Sierra's quick reflexes and martial prowess. He recalls seeing her leap from the moving carriage the moment she sensed danger. Sierra blushes and laughs off the praise while Nito watches her with a blank expression. The boy asks about the White King's Knights, surprising the merchant with his ignorance. William describes the history of Rashausen and its current ruler, King Arnold. mentioning that the elite unit known as the White King's Knights serves directly under the crown. Although their public appearances are so rare that the truth about them remains a mystery, making the merchant feel as if meeting a member like Sierra is a genuine miracle. While Nito looks at her radiant smile and considers her the perfect heroine for this world, shifting the conversation to the merchant's own significant reputation across many different countries. As he is widely celebrated for dealing in incredibly rare and valuable treasures, prompting Nito to humbly bow and express his gratitude for such high praise, until William curiously asked what brought the boy to such a dangerous location, leading Nito to vaguely explain that he was simply setting out on a small adventure, which makes the merchant realize that the boy is likely heading toward a guild, a place that serves as the typical starting point for travelers in this new land. And Sierra eagerly offers to act as his guide once the carriage finally arrives, before she turns to him with a curious expression and asks about his character class, catching Nito completely off guard as he breaks into a nervous sweat, remembering the warnings he received about hiding his true identity from everyone he meets, causing him to hesitate in silence until Sierra calls out his name in confusion, until he finally reveals that he is a healer, prompting William to ask if he plans to join a party, and he replies that he might consider it if he manages to find the right group, leading Sierra to cheerfully promise that she will help him find others at the guild. William notes that healers face a difficult path, but encourages Nito to find a supportive party, while Sierra adds that his journey will serve as an inspiration to others struggling with their classes, causing the boy to smile nervously while silently noting her overwhelming level of optimism as the carriage continues its steady journey through the dense woods toward their next destination, where Sierra suddenly suggests that he should take up swordsmanship since he lacks offensive spells, confirming that it is entirely possible for him to master physical weaponry despite his role, explaining that anyone can pick up a sword or axe regardless of their specific character class, leading Nito to ponder the realization that his assigned class does not actually define his limits, though he still questions if elemental spells like fireballs or lightning strikes are within his reach, prompting a lesson on how sorcerers and healers possess fundamentally different internal magic structures, which leaves him looking somewhat dejected as he accepts that traditional combat magic is unavailable, until he mentions having already learned a spell known as Attribute Enhancement to Sierra's surprise, who details how that specific support magic is used exclusively to bolster the power of weapons, continuing with a complex explanation that leaves the boy feeling entirely confused and mentally exhausted. But she points out that having such a rare spell makes learning the sword even more beneficial, kindly offering to personally train him as the carriage finally nears a small cluster of buildings, arriving at the peaceful entrance of Tanya Village just as the sun begins to shift, where William suggests they step out and take a much-needed break from their long travel. But the trio quickly pauses when they notice something unusual happening just a short distance away, observing a large crowd of villagers gathered around a building with focused and curious expressions. Nito, Sierra, and William approach a villager to ask about the commotion, prompting the village elder to look up and question their identity. As the trio surveys the scattered debris and the group of distressed people, the elder apologizes while explaining that the village cannot host guests right now, revealing the tragic news that thieves attacked and kidnapped all of their women. While the men gather with makeshift weapons, determined to fight for their families, Sierra interjects by explaining that thieves and bandits operate with different motives, noting that most thieves maintain dark connections to various slave dealers. As the villagers listen with grim faces to her assessment of the situation, Sierra suddenly surprises everyone by offering to handle the rescue mission herself, supported by William, who reassures the elder that they should handle the task, suggesting that Nito accompany her since his skills will be of great help, after which Sierra asks if anyone knows where the thieves might have gone, causing a murmur of uncertainty to ripple through the crowd of armed men, until a small voice speaks up and claims to know the exact path, revealing a young boy named Jack who steps forward with intense determination, recounting how he followed the attackers while the adults were out hunting, describing a mountain camp where he saw his mother locked inside a cage. While the elder sadly explains that the boy's mother is his only relative, Jack looks up at Sierra and bravely offers to guide her to the hideout. Jack declares his fervent desire to save his mother and the other villagers. The journey leads deep into the mountains overlooking a dense, wooded area. From their vantage point, the group spots several cages filled with captives inside the camp. Sierra warns Jack of the danger and instructs him to head back to the village. Obeying the command, the young boy disappears into the thick bushes to return home. Unaware of the intruders, the bandits stand guard while casually chatting amongst themselves. The imprisoned women sit huddled together in the iron cages while waiting for rescue. Nito peeks out from behind a tree trunk while feeling like a game quest is unfolding. Sierra whispers her plan to take out the perimeter guards alongside her companion. Surprised by the instructions, Nito is told to stay put and wait for a signal. She emphasizes that since he is a healer, his role should be limited to support. Watching them head off, Nito realizes he has no choice but to follow orders. He decides to lay low to avoid further suspicion regarding his true power level. Preparing for combat, Sierra draws her blade while thinking of her duty as a knight. Meanwhile, the sun shines over Tanya village as the remaining residents wait in silence. Inside a small building, the elder sits at a table and hopes for their safety. He expresses confidence in the mission because the skilled warrior Keith is with them. Suddenly, a blur of movement cuts through the air as the attack begins. Sierra strikes down a large bandit with clinical precision as her nightly training shows. Without breaking her stride, she continues forward to clear the remaining enemies from the camp. High above the rugged landscape, snow-capped peaks tower over a vast forest of evergreen trees. Back at the camp, three bandits lie lifeless on the ground with blood staining their tunics. Walking past the fallen enemies, Nito dismisses the feat while Sierra and the captives watch. Close-up shots reveal the heavy iron locks of the cages have been completely shattered. Directing the freed villagers, Sierra tells everyone to follow quietly as they prepare to leave. She remarks on how fortunate it is that most of the thieves were away from camp. Looking back at the empty cages, Nito feels that everything went much too smoothly. Sierra urges the group to remain vigilant while they begin their journey back to the village. Suddenly, the female knight halts her movement as she senses a dangerous presence nearby. Emerging from the shadows, a group of well-armed bandits blocks the path with smug expressions. The enemies quickly surround the group from all sides, cutting off any chance of escape. Recognizing the dire situation, Sierra's expression turns serious as she realizes they fell into a trap. The lead bandit laughs maliciously, claiming he would never let his valuable cargo be taken easily. Observing the confrontation, Nito remains quiet while sweat beads on his forehead from the tension. Her focus intensifying, Sierra glares at the man standing at the head of the enemy group. She points her weapon forward and identifies the leader as a man named Oliver Joe. The man grins widely, clearly amused that his reputation has preceded him in this place. Sierra continues by revealing his past as a former captain of the Royal Capital's Band of Ashes. Standing by her side, Nito listens to the grim history of the traitorous night before them. A dark memory flashes by of the man slaughtering his own soldiers and burning a city. Oliver Joe mockingly welcomes the introduction, while confirming his new life in the thieving business. Sierra stares in disbelief, questioning how a knight of his former stature could fall so low. The traitorous captain looks on with a hollow gaze, wondering why his choice seems so strange. He argues that pledging allegiance to a king is nothing more than being a tool. Defending her sovereign, Sierra insists that the current king is a man of great generosity. Joe counters by asking if the king's word is truly absolute in all matters. He insults her conviction, claiming he has seen that same weak-willed look in many victims. A cruel grin spreads across his face as he continues to taunt the young knight. Joe looks her over and calculates the high price she would fetch as cargo. Suddenly, the leader orders his subordinates to execute all the men in the group. Panic sets in among the freed villagers as the bandits prepare to strike. Sierra steps forward and commands Nito to flee with the others while she holds the line. Her eyes sharpen with resolve as she gathers magical energy for a defensive strike. An ice windstorm erupts from her feet, blasting back the surrounding enemies in a frozen swirl. Joe claps slowly in mock admiration of the White King's knightly prowess. Shocked by his reaction, Sierra realizes that he was fully aware of her status. The man remarks that she seems far too young to hold such a title. He explains that her specific armor gave away her allegiance the moment he saw her. Exploiting her focus on the leader, a massive bandit lunges toward Nito and the villagers. A heavy strike lands with a powerful impact as the battle truly begins. A hulking bandit looms over a fallen villager with a raised blade. Nito quietly invokes his magic, a glowing circular crest materializing in front of him. A violent surge of dark power erupts forward, obliterating the attacker in a single blow. Saving the man from certain death, Nito reminds a distracted Sierra to keep her guard up. The young man marvels at the raw power of her specialized offensive class. While the group cuts through the remaining thugs, the bandit leader sighs at the display. Stepping onto the battlefield, he laments being burdened by such incompetent subordinates. Sierra swiftly dispatches the final surrounding enemy with a precise thrust of her blade. A sudden, desperate plea for help echoes from the shadows of the nearby forest. Startled by the scream, Sierra spins around to find the source of the commotion. The freed women watch in terror as a mother cries out for her missing son. Emerging from the brush, the leader holds a trembling young boy hostage by the neck. Sierra gasps in horror upon realizing that the child has fallen into enemy hands. The villainous man sneers, finding it hilarious that they left the boy unattended. He continues his psychological taunts, berating her for such a rookie mistake in enemy territory. Trembling with rage, the female knight demands the immediate release of the innocent captive. Little Jack weeps uncontrollably, calling out for his family through his fear. Losing his patience, the captor barks at the child to remain silent while gripping his hair. He exerts more pressure on the boy's head, forcing a pained grunt from the child. Nito looks on with a stoic expression, simply remarking on how loud children can be. Sierra's blood pressure rises as she listens to the bandit's cruel taunts. The villain tightens his grip on the small, sharp blade in his hand. He declares his murderous intent while the terrified boy weeps in his arms. Nito's expression darkens with annoyance as he prepares to make his move. Panicking, Sierra cries out that she will not be fast enough to help. The boy's mother screams Jack's name in a fit of hysterical despair. Suddenly, the bandit's smug expression falters as a shadow looms directly behind him. A sharp blade is pressed firmly against his neck with lethal intent. With blinding speed, Nito thrusts his weapon through the man's throat from behind. The villain gasps in total shock as the cold steel pierces his flesh. He trembles violently, blood beginning to spill from his open mouth. He manages a final confused thought while his throat is completely destroyed. The force of the follow-through strike practically tears the villain apart. Sierra watches with a dropped jaw, unable to comprehend what just happened. A sharp, cold gaze reflects the absolute finality of the lethal encounter. Nito stands over the scene with a calm and indifferent posture. Little Jack stares up at his savior, wondering when he even arrived. The youth gives the child a brief, silent glance before turning away. Murmurs of shock and awe spread through the group of rescued women. Nito remains silent, his face showing the slight strain of the high-speed movement. Sierra suggests the group should head back, since everyone in the village is likely worried. Keith calmly agrees to the proposal while Nito remains silent and sweat drops. Suddenly, Sierra's hand reaches out and firmly grips Nito to prevent his escape. She leans in with a terrifyingly menacing expression, demanding an immediate explanation. Questions about his instantaneous movement and the stolen knife fly at the bewildered youth. Sierra refuses to let the matter drop, insisting that he is hiding his true identity. Her interrogation intensifies as she demands to inspect his character status screen right now. Nito frantically waves his hands in defense, trying to delay the inevitable confrontation. Sierra glares at him with suspicion, clearly unsatisfied with his deflective behavior. She eventually turns away, warning him that he must explain everything once they return. The two men walk behind the group as they begin their journey home. Nito attempts to change the subject by praising Keith's impressive display of magic. Keith remains stoic, eyeing the young man with a look of deep contemplation. He offers a knowing smirk, admitting that his own power pales in comparison to Nito's. Watching Sierra comfort the rescued women, Nito wonders if he should have stayed hidden. He reflects on the advice he received, feeling the weight of his secret abilities. Clenching his fist, he reassures himself that saving the child was the correct choice. The path through the dense forest leads them closer to their destination. A quiet village with simple houses finally appears on the horizon before them. A large crowd of villagers gathers to greet the returning group with wide eyes. A massive crowd of relieved villagers gathers to welcome the party back with open arms. Tears and joy fill the air as families reunite with the women rescued from captivity. Nito stands amidst the celebration, feeling a sense of unease while observing the crowd. His attention shifts toward the mysterious hooded girl standing apart from the joyous reunions. Clad in a heavy white cloak, the girl remains motionless and completely silent against a wall. Nito approaches her to ask why she isn't joining her family like the others. She offers no response, pointedly ignoring his presence as she stares into the distance. Scratching his head in confusion, the young man struggles to understand her strange behavior. One of the rescued villagers steps forward to explain that the girl isn't a local. The woman clarifies that the girl was already captive when they arrived and never spoke. Sierra notices the awkward interaction and asks if there is an issue with the stranger. Examining the girl closely, Sierra concludes that she is likely just traumatized and frightened. She offers warm words of comfort, promising to protect and care for the silent girl. Explaining their plan to reach the capital, Sierra promises to help the girl return home. Nito watches the interaction with a flat, unreadable expression as he processes the situation. Sierra gives the girl the option to depart on her own if she truly desires. A single tear tracks down the girl's face as she remains hidden beneath her hood. Breaking his silence, Nito bluntly offers to take the girl to her destination himself. Sierra immediately pulls him aside, whispering a sharp reminder to speak with more compassion. Unexpectedly, the girl reaches out and firmly tugs on Nito's sleeve to get his attention. Sierra's eyes widen in shock at the sudden, unexpected gesture from the silent girl. Clutching Nito's sleeve, the mysterious traveler continues to hold on firmly while keeping her head bowed. A vein twitches on Sierra's forehead as she struggles to process the girl's selective behavior. Forcing a tight smile, the knight decides to leave the stranger's care entirely in Nito's hands. She stomps away toward the welcoming villagers, clearly flustered and annoyed by the awkward situation. Standing together, the hooded girl softly confesses her dislike for Sierra, while Nito sighs in exasperation. Reeling from the sudden revelation, Nito shouts in disbelief upon discovering that the girl can speak. He demands to know why she chose to remain silent throughout their entire journey until now. Leaning in close, the girl mumbles that her silence was specifically intended for the other woman. A gentle breeze rustles through the nearby trees as the girl prepares to reveal her identity. Pulling back her hood to reveal her face, she introduces herself as Toatrika, leaving Nito blushing. Noticing his dazed expression, she leans forward and asks if he is even listening to her. Nito quickly confirms her name, while observing Sierra being mobbed by children in the distance. Looking her in the eye, he begins to speak a name he hasn't used in a long time. She stares back with an intense, unwavering gaze, capturing his full attention in the quiet evening. Standing amidst the village houses at sunset, he admits his real name is Masamune to avoid lying. Suddenly panicking, he frantically asks her to keep calling him Nito in front of the others. Leaning against a wooden wall, he questions the girl about the circumstances of her original capture. She recalls waking up in the forest only to be immediately taken away by the slave traders. Staring up at the darkening sky, they agree to begin the difficult search for her unknown home. Under a glowing crescent moon, the quiet village settles in for the night. Near the stables, the merchant and his assistant prepare their wagon for the next journey. The merchant puffs on his pipe while praising the legendary swordsmanship of the royal knight. His assistant admits he would be no match for her magnificent and overwhelming murderous intent. Shifting the conversation, the merchant brings up the potential problems regarding the young healer. He predicts that Nito will face a path full of thorns in his adventuring career. The assistant firmly disagrees while placing a hand on the edge of the wooden wagon. With an intense look in his eye, he claims that Nito is a total monster. Hearing this high praise, the merchant finds the situation becoming increasingly interesting. Meanwhile, the villagers gather around a central bonfire to celebrate during the final evening. Sierra maintains a harsh glare while the merchant wears a serene and knowing smile. Feeling the weight of her stare, Nito sweats nervously as the girl dozes beside him. As dawn breaks, the villagers wave farewell to the travelers as they resume their journey. The horse-drawn carriage rolls slowly down the winding dirt path toward their next destination. Inside the cabin, Sierra suddenly demands to know how a healer could possibly defeat Oliver. She insists on a satisfactory explanation while the merchant listens quietly to their conversation. Leaning in with a piercing gaze, she questions if he is actually a healer. To prove his identity, Nito manifests a glowing status window displaying his stats and skills. The group gathers around the interface to confirm that his claims are indeed the truth. He explains how the unique Godspeed skill allowed him to outmaneuver his opponent and win. Inside the carriage, Sierra offers a sincere apology for her doubts as Nito calmly accepts her words. Sweating slightly, Nito secretly expresses relief that he learned the mimic's life ability before this moment. The merchant suddenly calls out as the massive white walls of Razhausen appear on the horizon. Looking out with a restless gaze, Nito marvels at the sheer scale of the impressive royal capital. The group enters a bustling thoroughfare lined with towering stone architecture and diverse crowds of people. As the wagon comes to a halt, the merchant announces that they have reached their parting point. He explains his mission to deliver goods to the castle while expressing hope for a future reunion. Showing his gratitude, Nito offers a polite bow as the kind merchant waves a friendly goodbye. The travelers stand together on the cobblestone street while watching the horse-drawn carriage disappear into the distance. Turning toward her companions, Sierra suggests making their way to the local guild for the next step. They soon arrive before a grand stone edifice adorned with tall banners and heraldic crests. Stepping through the heavy doors, the trio enters a lively hall filled with rows of adventurers. Nito takes in the rowdy atmosphere of the combined guild and tavern, where locals cheer loudly. Leading him forward, Sierra directs Nito to a wooden counter where a receptionist awaits behind an orb. The staff member requests that Nito place his hand on the crystal device to verify his status. Focusing his resolve, Nito reminds himself to stay low profile to avoid drawing unwanted attention. He reaches out and makes contact with the smooth surface of the humming magical artifact. A faint light emanates from the device as other guild members continue their conversations in the background. The receptionist confirms his name while staring at the glowing data projected onto the sphere. Showing a standard profile, the device validates his identity as a healer and completes his registration process. With his registration complete, Sierra turns to Nito and asks what he plans to do next. Addressing Toad directly, Nito inquires whether she would like to pay a visit to the town hall. He explains that the municipal records might contain vital clues regarding the location of her hometown. Looking away with a melancholic expression, Toad dismisses the suggestion and says she might go later. Nito observes her somber reaction and realizes that she does not seem very eager to find home. Shifting the conversation, he asks Toei if she also intends to register herself as an adventurer. Suddenly, a massive hairy arm reaches out and firmly grips Nito by the shoulder from behind. A burly, intoxicated adventurer with a thick beard leers while commenting on Nito's beautiful companions. At a nearby table, his companions grin and suggest that Nito should share the girls with them. Maintaining a polite smile despite the tension, Nito explains that the two women are his friends. The drunkard's face twists in anger as he aggressively commands Nito to leave his friends behind. Other guild members join in the harassment, mocking Nito's youth and telling him to go home. Boasting of his C-grade status, the man claims he and his friends will take care of them. Toa gazes at the situation with a sharp, cold intensity that signals her growing displeasure. Sierra steps forward with a look of stern disapproval, telling the man that he is being rude. The drunkard ignores her and continues to suggest that she abandon the kid for his group instead. The guild's entrance suddenly slams open as a group of armored knights rushes into the tavern. One of the female knights immediately kneels before Sierra and expresses relief at finding her safely. Shaken by the unexpected arrival of her subordinates, Sierra stares at the knight in complete shock. Nito remains standing in a daze while still held by the drunkard, baffled by the sudden revelation. The drunkard remains frozen with his arm on Nito's shoulder, sensing the heavy atmosphere from the new arrivals. The female knight leader looks around the tavern and asks if her group has interrupted an important moment. Sierra quickly introduces Nito and Toa, explaining that she promised to guide them to the capital's guild. Hearing this, the knight bows politely and thanks the duo for looking after their commander during her journey. The knight then suggests returning to the castle, but the drunkard interrupts with a loud, aggressive shout. Gritting his teeth in a fit of rage, the man mutters about the newcomers having a lot of nerve. He suddenly lunges forward and grabs the female knight's collar, demanding she stop ignoring him while he speaks. Without flinching, the knight reaches up and firmly grasps the man's wrist to halt his aggressive movement. She instantly overpowers the drunkard by pinning his arm behind his back, forcing him to the ground in pain. Nito watches the brief scuffle and silently wonders if a C-grade adventurer is actually this weak. Moving outside the guild building, the group stands beneath a large heraldic banner as they prepare to part. Sierra double-checks with Toa regarding the town hall visit, receiving a quiet confirmation that she is fine. Extending an invitation for the future, Sierra tells them to visit the Eckerlot residence if they encounter trouble. She formally leaves Toa in Nito's care, and he offers a simple nod of reassurance in return. Walking away through the busy streets of the capital, Nito contemplates his next move with Toa at his side. He suddenly stops in his tracks as he realizes he has absolutely no money for food or lodging. A shopkeeper with curly hair and a bandana approaches them from the side. Calling out to the traveling duo, she leans in closer to inspect Nito's unique attire, commenting on how strange and unfamiliar his clothes appear. Leading them into her general store, the woman expresses utter disbelief that they were traveling with empty pockets. She points toward Nito's worn-out cloak and adds that his traveling clothes are looking quite filthy as well. The shopkeeper offers to trade Nito's current garments for new outfits for both him and Toa. While Nito acknowledges his clothes are worn, the woman insists the high-quality fabric is worth salvaging. She emphasizes that throwing away such premium material would be a complete waste of resources. Contemplating his old high school uniform, Nito decides to take her up on the trade offer. As she begins searching her shelves, the merchant asks whether Nito is a warrior or a hunter. Her jaw drops in absolute shock when he casually reveals that his class is actually a healer. Quickly recovering, she mutters to herself while gathering several items from behind the counter. She presents him with a fresh set of traveling robes along with a small pouch for herbs. Confused by the gesture, Nito asks if healers truly require herbs, catching the shopkeeper off guard. A collection of various potions and botanical ingredients illustrates how healers typically supplement their limited magical power. Turning her focus toward the quiet girl, the shopkeeper asks To to disclose her own class. Nito realizes he has neglected to check To's status screen since they began their journey together. Toa calmly states that she is a paladin, a revelation that leaves the shopkeeper stunned once more. A detailed status window appears, showing To's high-level attributes and her identity as a member of the demon race. The merchant stares at them in silence, trying to process the rarity of such a powerful companion. Sensing Nito's confusion, the shopkeeper explains that the paladin class is more commonly known as a magic knight. Visual representations depict the class's unique ability to blend devastating swordsmanship with high-level magical spells. The conversation shifts as the woman points out that Toa is officially part of the demon race. A flashback of the King of Grey Belka surfaces, recalling his long history of conflict against the demons. Nito smiles awkwardly while asking for a basic explanation of what the demon race actually is. The merchant explains that the demon race resides beyond the Great Forest and possesses immense magical energy. Shifting the topic, she asks Nito and Toa about the nature of their personal relationship. Nito rubs the back of his head and laughs awkwardly at the mention of their strange pairing. Outside the store, citizens go about their daily lives along the cobblestone streets of the busy town. A boot steps firmly onto the wooden floorboards as the pair prepares to reveal their new looks. The shopkeeper gasps in delight upon seeing the transformation of her two mysterious customers. Nito and Toa emerge wearing their high-quality new traveling gear and elegant robes. Leaning against the counter, a sturdy broadsword sits waiting as a supplementary gift for the young lady. Toa examines the blade while the woman insists the weapon is a fair trade for the rare fabric. Reaching out, the shopkeeper offers a small pouch of coins as an additional token of her appreciation. She pulls Nito aside to offer a serious word of advice regarding his companion's safety. The merchant warns that the girl's demonic heritage and high magic power make her a target for kidnappers. She stares intently at Nito, demanding that he take responsibility and protect her like a man. Nito peeks over at Toa while reflecting on how discrimination and fear plague every world he visits. With a confident expression, he assures the woman that she can certainly count on him to stay vigilant. The shopkeeper offers a warm and genuine smile, relieved by his determination. She introduces herself as Sharon and invites them to return whenever they need more supplies. The journey continues through the vast town square, where people gather around a central fountain. Sitting at a wooden table, To stares silently into her mug while lost in her own thoughts. A sharp eye glances sideways as the atmosphere suddenly shifts. Toa sips from her large wooden mug, noting the drink is delicious as Nito watches her. A lone mug sits on the table while Nito reflects on the power levels of the demon race. The digital interface of Nito's mind focuses on the mysterious Demon's Eye of Truth skill. Leaning forward, Nito asks Toa if she has the ability to see his status window. To looks down with a calm expression and confirms she can see his stats perfectly. Nito exhales deeply while looking away, realizing his suspicions about her unique abilities were correct. The two continue their conversation at the outdoor table as townspeople pass by in the background. Toa stares blankly into her mug, admitting she found his abnormal status to be quite ordinary. Nito breaks into a nervous sweat, shocked that his stats are irregular even by demon standards. Past a nearby market stall, Nito questions why she was captured despite her immense power. Blushing slightly, To hides her face behind her drink and confesses she was simply too scared. Nito stares at her with a deadpan expression, processing her admission of vulnerability and fear. Taking another sip, Nito asks where she was living before he found her in the forest. Toa casually mentions her previous residence was a castle, making Nito react with extreme surprise. Nito's mind spins with wild theories about her being a noble or a high-ranking princess. Toa explains in a matter-of-fact tone that her life in the castle was quite uneventful, She looks away while describing her repetitive morning routine of magic and swordsmanship training. Gripping her mug tightly, she recalls spending her nights waiting for her family to come home. Nito listens intently as she describes playing alone in the treasure room and talking to pixies. A vision of a young girl standing before massive stone walls reveals she'd never left the castle. Nito realizes Toe's fears stem from her sheltered life behind the castle walls. Observing the sprawling city below as she experiences the outside world for the first time, a sudden flash of lightning tears through the sky during their journey. Nito delivers a powerful punch directly into the face of a snarling goblin. They trek through a forest clearing littered with the fallen bodies of defeated monsters. A steady hand carefully extracts a jagged tooth from the mouth of a corpse. Resting in the woods, Nito ponders why these creatures leave behind bodies instead of vanishing. He learns that only monsters inside dungeons disappear, while those in the wild remain. The conversation shifts to the intelligence of Momono compared to the mindless nature of monsters. Arriving at a grand building, they enter a bustling hall filled with other travelers. A receptionist counts out a stack of coins as a reward for the collected teeth. Toe covers her mouth and lets out a long, weary yawn from the day's travel. Noticing her exhaustion, Nito suggests they quickly find a comfortable inn to spend the night. The receptionist points out a vacancy on a map, much to Nito's relief and gratitude. The sharp click of a polished boot echoes across the stone floor of the hall. Both Nito and Toa turn around in surprise as a stranger calls out to her. A man in an ornate military uniform bows and politely asks for Toa's name. Nito steps protectively in front of his companion, stating that she is with him. The stranger stares intently at Nito with a look of sudden curiosity and focus. Nito explains that he is a newcomer who just began his life as an adventurer today. The stranger in the military uniform smiles condescendingly. Acknowledging Nito is a newbie who wouldn't know him, he mockingly puts a hand to his head, scoffing at the idea of starting out by exterminating goblins. Nito stares back with a dry expression, internally questioning if everyone in this place loves to eavesdrop. Dismissively turning away, Nito suggests to Toa that they leave since being an adventurer is quite tough. The stranger looks down at them, warning that low-rank missions won't provide much money for their stay. Nito lets out a long, weary sigh, clearly annoyed by how persistent this man is being. Standing firm, Nito politely asks the stranger not to worry about them and to leave them be. The man's expression turns cold as he clarifies that his business is with the lady, not him. Nito's eyes narrow in irritation as he is told to shut his mouth by the arrogant stranger. The man begins boasting about his prowess, claiming he can easily hunt giant snakes and grizzly bears. A nearby burly man leans in, mentioning he saw the stranger arguing with someone else earlier that day. The stranger steps closer to Toa, dismissively identifying Nito as nothing more than a simple healer. He sighs dramatically while suggesting Nito's journey is essentially over before it even began. Reaching out a hand toward Toa, the man asks her what she thinks of his offer. He leans in with a smug grin, pressuring her to leave Nito and join him instead. Placing a hand on her shoulder, the stranger promises he can provide far more than her current companion. A close-up reveals his arrogant smile as he continues to belittle Nito's ability to satisfy her needs. Nito watches with a sharp gaze, concluding that this man definitely has a suspicious ulterior motive. Turning his head, Nito tells Toa they should get going and ignore the persistent stranger. Toa remains completely silent, her mouth set in a tense line as her name is called once more. A massive pillar of lightning suddenly erupts, engulfing the arrogant stranger in a blinding flash of light. The man lets out a blood-curdling scream as the intense electrical current surges through his body. Wide-eyed and paralyzed by the shock, he can only gasp in utter disbelief at the sudden attack. Smoke billows from his scorched uniform, while his hair stands on end from the residual static. Witnessing the sudden violence, two female adventurers nearby cover their mouths in pure terror. A heavy silence falls over the entire guild hall as everyone stares at the smoking body. Adventurers standing by the quest board break into a cold sweat, unable to look away. Toa maintains a dark and solemn expression, her eyes hidden beneath her long bangs. Nito tentatively calls her name while the defeated stranger lies motionless on the floor. Spinning around without a word, Toa prepares to leave the guild with a resolute gaze. Toa grabs Nito's hand and insists they leave immediately, much to his surprise. The arrogant man remains sprawled on the ground, twitching as smoke continues to rise from him. The view shifts outside to the stone buildings of the town under a vast, cloud-filled sky. Nito's boots click against the uneven cobblestones as he follows her out into the city. He continues to plead with her to stop for a second while walking quickly behind. To finally comes to a halt in a quiet side street while Nito finally reaches her. Standing in the shadows, she looks away and quietly asks him a single, pointed question. She turns back to confront him, frustrated that he didn't defend his honor against the insults. Nito looks at her with a dazed expression as she remarks on how strong he actually is. She stares downward, admitting that his power is exactly why his passive behavior was so upsetting. Nito stands back, explaining that he ignores such people because they are simply not worth the trouble. Clenching his fist, he argues that avoiding unnecessary scenes is the more logical path to take. Toa erupts in an emotional outburst, telling him that he should never have to compromise his dignity. Stunned by her passion, Nito remains silent while her words resonate deeply within him. She demands to know if he wasn't at least slightly frustrated by the blatant mockery. Looking away with a sweat drop, Nito finally admits that the situation was indeed very vexing. He ponders the weight of that feeling, staring into the distance as he processes his internal conflict. Internal thoughts swirl as he acknowledges his anger while questioning his own passive nature. His focus shifts back to Toa, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for her unexpected support. Toa wipes her eyes, overwhelmed by her own protective feelings for a companion she barely knows. Standing in the quiet alley, Nito offers a sincere apology for causing her such distress. Looking up at the evening sky, Nito thanks her for being the one to show anger for him. They discuss his status as a healer and the societal expectations of being weak. Toe smiles warmly and promises to always stand up and be angry on his behalf. Images of his new companions flash through his mind as he considers life after his eventual revenge. He decides that for both their sakes, he must transform the way he views himself and others. Toa glances back with a softened expression, feeling a new sense of connection to him. The scene transitions to the city under a blanket of stars as the day comes to an end. A hearty meal of sliced meat and steaming soup is served atop a rustic wooden table. Nito and Toa share a quiet dinner together at the tavern while discussing the local cuisine. Nito asks Toa about the type of food she consumed during her time in the castle. Toa explains she ate special meals prepared by her mother to enhance her magical capabilities. Nito listens thoughtfully, becoming increasingly curious about her origins in the land of demons. Toa continues eating with a joyful expression, noting that this meat makes her feel stronger. Nito watches her with a soft smile, glad that the simple meal brings her such happiness. After finishing their dinner, they discuss taking on a more lucrative quest the following morning. Toe sets her floral hair accessory down on a wooden surface before preparing for her bath. She relaxes in a steaming tub, letting the hot water soothe her after a long day. The pair enters their room at the popular inn, relieved to have found a place to stay. Nito offers to sleep on the hard floor to ensure Toei has the comfortable bed. Toa stops him and suggests that he simply sleep on the other side of the bed. She insists he join her, worried that he might catch a cold sleeping on the floor. Nito scratches his face awkwardly, admitting he tends to move around quite a bit while sleeping. Toa sits on the mattress and warmly expresses her complete trust in him. She turns away and begins pulling the white sheets over herself to settle in for the night. They lie awkwardly in the same bed, exchanging quiet good night wishes as the candle is extinguished. Toe looks back at him one more time, questioning if he intends to actually go to sleep. The bed frame creaks softly as they shift around, trying to find a comfortable position in silence. Outside, the crescent moon shines brightly amidst a vast field of stars over the inn. Nito remains wide awake in the darkness, staring tensely as he processes the proximity of his companion. Nito lies awake in the shared bed, his mind racing as he struggles to find sleep. Toei suddenly speaks up from beside him, asking if he has managed to drift off. Startled by her voice, Nito quickly confirms that he is still wide awake. Toa stares into the darkness and begins to recount her childhood spent in isolation. Nito remains silent, listening intently as she reflects on her time within the castle walls. She describes the vast empty halls where her family members were rarely seen during the day. Her voice carries a hint of sadness while explaining her lonely life among the pixies. A sense of vulnerability fills the air as she pauses her story for a moment. Nito processes her words, realizing how much her life has changed since they met. Toa looks down softly, admitting that she no longer feels lonely because of his presence. With a final exchange of quiet goodnight wishes, the two companions settle in for sleep. High above the sleeping town, a bright shooting star streaks across the vast starlit sky. The morning sun rises high, shining over the building as a voice calls for Nito. Sierra waits in the hallway and greets Nito as he opens the door looking groggy. Rubbing his eyes, Nito questions why she has arrived at such an early hour. Sierra looks at him with a puzzled expression and clarifies that it is nearly noon. She announces her intention to provide him with a lesson in swordsmanship for the day. Nito turns back toward the room to inform Toa about Sierra's unexpected visit. Toa rises from the bed and stretches lazily, still dressed in her thin nightwear. Nito recoils in frantic embarrassment, shouting at her to dress properly for their guest. Nito looks panicked while Sierra stands beside him with a dark, intense look on her face. A loud crash echoes through the building as a blast of lightning erupts from the window. Moments later, Nito frantically tries to calm down Toa and Sierra after a sudden outburst. The trio eventually sits down for a meal consisting of sliced meat, salad, bread, and soup. Sierra bows her head in a sincere apology, admitting she jumped to conclusions earlier that morning. Toa looks away with a frustrated and suspicious expression, questioning the conduct of the local knights. Nito reassures everyone that he is fine and that the physical altercation didn't actually hurt him. Sierra listens closely and notes that she overheard Toa calling Nito by the name Masamune earlier. Toa turns away in embarrassment, her face flushed as she realizes her careless mistake in identity. A steaming mug of tea sits on the table as Sierra acknowledges that Nito is an alias. Nito asks Sierra to continue calling him Nito in public to maintain his secret identity. Nito watches Toa eat while thinking about her accidental slip of his real name. Sierra then asks Nito if the name Masamune belongs to a specific region known as Gikoku. Nito looks surprised by the mention of Gikoku and asks for clarification on what that is. Sierra explains that Gikoku is a country located across the sea from the Vanami continent. Nito contemplates the name Gikoku and decides he must look into the matter further. Sierra gestures toward the table and asks Nito what his plans are for the afternoon. Nito mentions that he needs money and is considering taking on a quest from the guild. Hearing this, Sierra smiles brightly and asks if she can accompany him on his next mission. Nito looks at her in surprise, momentarily stunned by her sudden request to join their party. Sierra explains she can help them take on higher reward quests as an A-grade adventurer. Nito agrees to her proposal, and the group heads toward the Adventurers Guild building. Outside the guild, it is mentioned that adventurers are ranked from F to SSS grade. Inside, Sierra notes that while the duo can usually only take E-grade requests, her presence allows D-grade or higher. Nito asks if Sierra is an adventurer, and she explains she took requests before serving the country. She further clarifies that all knights in the country are actually required to register as adventurers. Nito questions if it's safe for her, a Knight of the White King, to be seen in public. Sierra confidently replies that few people know her true identity. Toei remains silent and somewhat grumpy while Sierra emphasizes she is here as an adventurer. The group stands before the quest board, browsing the various requests posted there. Nito looks at the board thoughtfully, though he seems to be struggling with something. He realizes he cannot read the language written on the quest papers. Nito stares intensely at a specific flyer, trying to decipher the illustration. He points at a drawing of a horned monster and asks what it is. Sierra identifies the creature as a Kalane, a massive two-horned beast dwelling in the forest. Having found a suitable target, Nito tears the Kalane extermination request from the board. After finishing the paperwork at the counter, Sierra asks if they can visit a nearby store. A bell chimes as they enter a shop specializing in armor and various supplies. The shopkeeper greets Sierra warmly, asking if she is on her day off. Sierra confirms she is heading to the forest and needs to stock up on medicine for the mission. Sierra picks up a glass bottle from the shelf to show the others. She gestures to her ear while describing the protective properties of the medicine. The group prepares to depart as the shopkeeper watches from behind the counter. Unexpectedly, the shopkeeper calls out, recognizing Toe as a paladin from a previous visit. Sierra is visibly stunned by the revelation that Toe possesses such a rare class. Realizing she blurted out a secret, the merchant covers her mouth in embarrassment. The trio continues their journey toward the entrance of the massive grill forest. Sierra emphasizes how incredibly rare the paladin class is within the entire kingdom. Nito expresses his concern about her casually sharing such confidential information with others. Sierra encourages them to move on while Nito privately regrets revealing his identity. High above, the white clouds drift slowly over the dense forest canopy. Sierra halts the group's progress when she notices a group of people ahead. She rushes towards several exhausted adventurers resting against a large tree trunk. The wounded men look up with weary eyes, relieved to see a friendly face. Sierra crouches down to inspect their injuries and asks for an explanation. One of the injured men begins to tell a story about their hunt. Nito observes the man closely, noting how his voice trembles with lingering fear. The man recalls a sudden ambush by a horde of aggressive green goblins. He mentions they were hunting orcs when the situation turned dire very quickly. Even the local hunting wolves were seen fleeing from the unidentified threat in the woods. The injured adventurers look back with regret, wishing they had retreated much sooner. Meanwhile, one man identifies their attacker as a creature known as a Kalane. Looking down from above, the group explains how bizarre the encounter felt. A flashback reveals the towering, glowing beast that once confronted them in the woods. The adventurer trembles while emphasizing that this specimen was far from normal. He clenches his hand against his leg while reliving the terrifying memories. Breaking her silence, Sierra asks if the monster appeared covered in grains of light. Her expression turns grim as she awaits a response from the wounded men. In response, the survivors frantically agree that her description matches exactly what they saw. Behind them, Nito remains silent and observes the growing tension within the forest. Suddenly, a bone-chilling scream erupts, sending flocks of birds into the sky. Alerted by the sound, Nito and his companion look toward the deafening noise. Sierra is struck with visible horror as the roar shakes the surrounding trees. As if responding, sharp claws dig deep into a tree trunk while a monster approaches. The injured party cowers in terror, identifying the approaching shadow as their attacker. A massive, corrupted Kalane with jagged teeth and dark aura emerges from the shadows. Sierra heroically commands the wounded to flee while she prepares to take a stand. The monstrous beast opens its maw and unleashes a ferocious, saliva-filled roar. Nito marvels at the sight, commenting on finally seeing a real Kalane in person. Sierra immediately warns him that this creature is something much worse than a normal beast. Sierra explains that the monster they are facing is actually a rare Newt Kalane. She elaborates that just as the guild has ranks, monsters are also graded by strength. While standard Kalanes are grade B, she points out that hunting one is an A-grade request. Due to its extreme ferocity and unique voice, the Newt variant is considered a genuine grade A threat. The monster's slitted eyes glare with a deadly intensity, confirming its status as a highly dangerous foe. Turning to her companions, Sierra asks if they are holding up well after the creature's roar. She admits that the sound was so powerful it caused her own mana circulation to become unstable. Despite her worry, she reflects on the brief glimpse she previously saw of Nito's impressive combat prowess. Nito remains perfectly calm and asks if he should step in to handle the situation. He looks up at the towering beast with a detached curiosity, showing no signs of fear. Gauging the enemy, Nito notes its level 32 status and decides it is manageable. He reassures Sierra that everything will be fine and offers to take care of the monster. Turning to Toa, Nito asks her to look after Sierra while he moves toward the beast. Sierra grips her weapon tightly, her hand visibly shaking as she prepares for the upcoming confrontation. Her gaze hardens with intense focus as she determines not to be a burden in this fight. Insisting on leading the charge, Sierra steps forward and tells the others she will go ahead. She rushes into the fray, invoking a magical circle that manifests a massive blade of solid ice. As she approaches, she wonders if the creature might be physically immune to standard metallic weapons. She prepares to test this theory by landing a heavy blow directly against the monster's scales. With a thunderous impact, she swings her frozen greatsword against the beast to verify its durability. Sierra grunts in frustration as her ice blade fails to pierce the creature's incredibly dense hide. She quickly leaps backward to create some distance after realizing her physical attacks are useless. Massive claws immediately slam down into the earth where she stood just a second ago. The beast follows up with a powerful tail swipe that sends shockwaves rippling through the clearing. Bright magic circles manifest around the creature's antlers as it begins channeling a massive energy surge. Toei steps forward with a determined expression and invokes a powerful lightning-based spell to intervene. A violent bolt of electricity strikes the monster directly, but dissipates harmlessly against its magical aura. Stunned by the failure of her spell, Toe exclaims that magic seems to have no effect. Sierra explains that the beast's antlers allow it to manipulate magic particles into a protective shield. Nito observes the phenomenon closely and suggests that they must destroy the antlers to break its defense. The group stands their ground as the Newt Kalane continues to growl and gather more energy. Noticing a sudden shift in the air, Nito urgently warns Sierra to watch out for an incoming strike. Fear flashes across Sierra's face as she realizes she is the target of a devastating move. A blinding beam of pure white light erupts from the monster, carving a path of destruction through the woods. Smoke and debris cloud the area as the forest landscape is drastically altered by the explosion. Sierra stares in utter disbelief at the raw power displayed by the Grade A monster. She collapses to the ground in a state of shock, her weapon forgotten beside her. The Newt Kalane opens its maw wide once again, preparing to unleash another terrifying blast. Refusing to let the creature strike again, Toe rushes forward to shield her fallen companion. She surprises everyone by manifesting two complex magic circles simultaneously to mount a desperate defense. Toa unleashes her lightning howl through multiple stacked magic circles to counter the monster's overwhelming energy beam. The Newt Kalane intensifies its focus as the blinding white light continues to pour from its open maw. Sierra watches the clash in total shock, gasping that defeating such a beast seems impossible. Toe admits their current attacks are completely ineffective against the creature's formidable defenses. Nito narrows his eyes and realizes that brute force alone will not resolve the situation. He analyzes the monster's magical control, suspecting it has a specific gimmick similar to his own soulbreak ability. Observing carefully, he points out a momentary lapse in the creature's protection whenever it fires its beam. Toa expresses deep concern for his safety, fearing the consequences if he were to take a direct hit. Nito remains calm and silent while formulating a plan to exploit the opening he discovered. Rejecting Toe's offer to act as a decoy, he announces his intention to strike during the next attack. He reassures his worried companion that he will finish the battle quickly before stepping forward once more. As the monster prepares another blast, Nito moves with incredible speed toward the center of the clearing. He activates his soulbreak skill, channeling his hidden power into a singular, decisive motion. A brilliant flash of light envelops the battlefield as the protagonist reaches the towering beast. Nito reaches out and firmly grasps the creature's massive left antler with his bare hand. He quickly mirrors the action on the other side, securing a tight grip on the second antler. Standing directly before the monster, he prepares to use his immense strength to dismantle its primary source of power. Cracks begin to form in the creature's hide as Nito exerts forceful pressure on the magical appendages. The Newt Kalane lets out an agonizing roar while its mouth hangs wide in a scream of pain. With a final surge of power, Nito tears the antlers completely off the beast's head to shatter its defense. Sierra stands in stunned silence as she witnesses Nito's effortless display of raw power. Nito turns back and casually mentions that the monster's defensive capabilities are now completely neutralized. The young woman struggles to process how easily the legendary beast was incapacitated by his hands. Stepping forward, the protagonist requests to finish the job alone to test a specific theory. He casts a dark, chilling gaze toward Toa while asking her to keep his true abilities hidden. Meanwhile, high above the city, the towers of the royal castle stand against a clouded sky. A messenger bursts into a private office to report a strange phenomenon in the Grill Forest. The listener leans in with interest upon hearing about mysterious particles of light surrounding a Kalane. The knight reports that 4 survivors are currently recovering at the local hospital after their encounter. He continues his debrief by mentioning that 3 more adventurers remain on the battlefield right now. Hearing that one of the combatants is a silver-haired woman with a rapier catches the official's attention. Reinhardt stands up abruptly from his desk as he pieces together the identity of the warrior. He instructs his subordinate to immediately alert Raid and Hilda about the developing situation. Grabbing his long white coat, the leader of the White King's Knights prepares to mobilize for Sierra. Back in the woods, Toe trembles in fear, while observing the terrifying pressure emanating from her companion. The narrative shifts back to 2 days prior as the sun sets over a quiet village. Nito recalls the time he spent checking on Oliver's status while the rest of Tanya village slept. He reviews a list of fire-based skills and items that the deceased magic user once possessed. Narrowing his focus on the transparent screen, the protagonist notices a strange detail among the entries. He discovers an unexpected message left behind within the system logs of his former acquaintance. A digital message icon suddenly pings into existence above the protagonist's head. Leaning against a stone wall, the young healer realizes he has received a new quest announcement. He opens the letter to find a series of handwritten notes detailing a tragic personal history. His eyes widen in disbelief as he reads the grim contents of the message. Memories of Oliver's rise as a knight and the loss of his wife Anna flood the narrative. Nito ponders the motives behind the fallen man's decision to accept a royal assassination order. Suddenly, a system notification alerts him that he has successfully acquired the Hellfire magic. A description window explains that this flame is fueled by the intense grudge of Oliver Joe. Letting out a weary sigh, the protagonist reflects on the dying man's hatred for healers. He remains seated in the quiet village night, staring up at the darkened sky in contemplation. A sudden realization causes him to pause as he considers a new tactical possibility. Nito wonders if reversing the skill would grant him access to an opposing element, like water. He triggers the mischievous reversal ability through the power of his unique divine title. The acquired magic begins to mutate on the transparent screen before his very eyes. The intense flames transform into a chilling new ability, known as the Goddess's Bloody Tears. The scene transitions away from the system log as the focus returns to the present battle. In the forest, the massive beast is crushed against the ground by a terrifying magic circle. The protagonist looks at his hands, feeling an eerie sensation that he is no longer himself. Cracks begin to form in the surrounding space as the sheer pressure of the spell intensifies. Toe points in horror at the swirling black aura manifesting around Nito's silhouette. Sharp black needles descend through the air, cracking the very atmosphere. A pair of eerie, darkened eyes stare out with an unsettling intensity. In the dense forest, the massive beast stands amidst the scattered party members. The shadowy eyes narrow as the mysterious spell continues to take effect. Suddenly, the wolf-like creature is struck by several blinding flashes of impact. A single dark tear begins to fall from one of the manifesting eyes. The droplet of liquid falls past a faint, shadowy smile. The monster shrieks in agony as a barrage of vertical light beams pierces it. More dark liquid begins to flow steadily from the corner of the eyes. The creature's desperate screams intensify as it is pinned down by the pressure. Trapped in the relentless magical downpour, the beast continues to howl in pain. Toa stares in horror as the creature's body starts to fragment into pieces. Her expression is filled with sheer terror at the sight of the destruction. The magic continues to shred the monster's form under the heavy pressure. Nito looks on with a dazed expression as the forest around him trembles. The last remnants of the beast dissolve into floating black particles. A final drop of fluid hits the surface of a dark pool. A giant, weeping visage looms over the battlefield as the creature collapses. A massive geyser of black sludge erupts violently from the impact site. A white boot approaches the edge of the expanding dark puddle on the ground. Sierra stares in wide-eyed disbelief at the sudden and overwhelming destruction. As the dust settles, Toe asks if the terrifying battle is finally over. Nito realizes that the unsettling presence he felt earlier has completely vanished. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps begins to thud against the forest floor. The young healer's expression shifts to one of immediate and sharp alertness. Sensing an approach, Nito urges Toe to flee before they are discovered. Their boots quickly pivot as they prepare to leave the site behind. Pausing for a moment, Nito asks Sierra if she can handle the aftermath. The knight questions if he truly intends for her to explain everything. Nito clarifies that he showed her his power because he trusts her. Bidding a temporary farewell, he promises to reunite with her in the capital. Sierra is left standing in the silent wake of the massive slaughter. Her face beads with sweat as she grapples with the weight of the secret. Standing alone in the shadows, she wonders about Nito's true identity. Meanwhile, 3 riders on horseback gallop fiercely through the dense woods. The lead knight notes that their targets are supposed to be in this area. Raid Black grins with a sadistic anticipation for his next bloody duel. Beside him, Hilda Ekala remains silent with a cold and focused gaze. The riders continue their high-speed pursuit through the blurring trees. Suddenly, the leader jolts in surprise as if sensing a strange disturbance behind him. Raid pulls his horse to a halt and looks back with a puzzled expression. The trail behind them remains empty and still beneath the tall trees. Turning back around, he dismisses his unease and claims it was nothing. Hilda watches him with a skeptical and somewhat annoyed look on her face. The riders finally emerge into a clearing filled with signs of a massive struggle. Raid shouts in disbelief while wondering where the target monster has gone. His eyes fixate on a giant broken husk rotting in the middle of the field. The knight argues with his teammates that they are currently out of leads. He falls into a brief, contemplative silence while staring at the wreckage. Approaching the lone survivor, Raid demands to know what transpired in the woods. He looms over Sierra and asks point blank if she was the one responsible. A young woman kneels beside the shaken knight to provide some quiet support. Sierra stares blankly ahead with wide, traumatized eyes and a pale face. The girl by her side looks up with a soft and patient expression. Raid mentions that their report indicated 2 adventurers should be at the site. Tilting her head down, Sierra whispers that the individuals are no longer there. The knight reacts with confusion to her vague and somber choice of words. He observes that slaying such a creature is a feat for multiple white knights. Sierra remains completely unresponsive, while beads of sweat form on her brow. Raid sighs in frustration when he realizes he will not get any more information. A subordinate laughs loudly, suggesting that the missing adventurers were likely eaten by the Newt Kalane. Leaning closer with a sinister grin, he insists his dark theory must be correct. Hilda yells at Raid to be quiet while the other man continues his obnoxious laughter. Rubbing his forehead in exasperation, Raid lets out a tired sigh as the scene remains chaotic. He commands the squad to contact the office and begin collecting evidence from the battle site. Meanwhile, the sun shines over the massive, fortified walls of the royal capital's central castle. Standing in the throne room, Raid reports Sierra's unstable condition to the seated monarch. King Arnold Rashausen nods calmly, entrusting the continuation of the investigation to his knight. A set of large ornate doors swing open as the audience with the king concludes. Daniel King greets Raid with a casual lean and a smirk, receiving a sharp rebuke for his insolence. Walking through the corridor, Daniel asks for confirmation regarding the identity of the slain beast. Raid pauses his stride as Daniel spreads his arms, begging for any small detail about the fight. Looking away, the knight confesses that he remains just as confused as everyone else about the incident. He directs his colleague toward the autopsy team, or Sierra herself if he wants more answers. Daniel maintains a sharp, toothy grin while closely observing his companion's stiff reaction. Narrowing his eyes, Raid asks what his friend is getting at with these persistent questions. Daniel claims their long history together makes it easy for him to spot a lie. He leans in closer to whisper that the entire situation feels incredibly suspicious to him. Raid's gaze hardens into a cold stare as he refuses to offer any further explanation. The fact remains that two of the three adventurers involved in the battle were nowhere to be found. Raid explains that the monster's corpse was too damaged to even be identified upon arrival. Daniel smirks while suggesting that the truth remains with the two missing adventurers. Looking down solemnly, Raid agrees that his companion's theory is likely correct. He watches Sierra closely, knowing she hides the truth but refuses to speak. Standing in the hall, the knight tells Daniel that he won't force her to reveal secrets. Daniel speculates that whoever killed the beast must possess strength far beyond an ordinary person. Looking serious, Raid posits that these mysterious individuals might even be stronger than themselves. Daniel bursts into loud laughter and declares such a feat of power to be impossible. He turns to ask if Raid truly believes these strangers could surpass his own skills. Raid remains uncertain but notes that Sierra must answer for any trouble they cause. A grand stone archway looms over the capital streets as the scene shifts. Nito and Toa sit together on a stone bench while the mystery of their allegiance lingers. Toa mentions that a healer using elemental magic is a completely unheard of anomaly. Nito looks down at the ground and decides to keep his magic sealed going forward. He stares at his open palms, remembering how easily he crushed the monster's horns. Toa reaches out and places her hand over his to offer him quiet comfort. Smiling gently, she promises to protect him so he never has to fight again. A faint blush appears on the healer's face as he quietly thanks her. Gazing up at a statue against the cloudy sky, he asks why she trusted him. Toa looks back at him with a soft expression while preparing to give her answer. Sierra walks toward Nito and Toa as they sit together in the plaza. Nito turns to Toa and promises to tell her the rest later. Standing before the pair, Sierra asks if she has interrupted an intimate moment. She stresses the importance of keeping a low profile to avoid unwanted attention. Sierra reveals she covered for them after the White Knights took the beast's corpse. Nito sighs upon realizing they will not receive a reward for their hard work. Looking troubled, Sierra maintains that staying undetected is for the best. A cackling voice suddenly echoes through the area as a predator finds his prey. Sierra reacts with pure horror at the sight of the unexpected intruder. The newcomer gathers a concentrated sphere of dark energy in his skeletal hand. He releases a devastating beam of power that tears through the open square. Resting a jagged red scythe on his shoulder, the man shows a terrifying grin. He recounts how his group arrived at the forest following the adventurer's report. The man details how they found the monster mutilated with its horns snapped. He notes the suspicious amount of magical residue left around the magic-resistant creature. Gesturing with his weapon, he explains that such a beast is normally indestructible. Toa and Nito listen intently as Sierra remains frozen by the man's logic. He stares them down while refusing to overlook the slaughter of a sacred beast. The assassin reveals he has been tailing Sierra because he never trusted her. Sierra shouts with all her might that her friends are not his enemies. The assassin dismisses Sierra's pleas as a blast of energy craters the floor. He vaults into the air, spinning his weapon in a wide and dangerous arc. Hovering above the group, he sadistically claims that he holds their fate in his hands. The killer's face contorts into a mask of rage as he screams his battle cry. A massive column of light pierces the sky, signaling the start of the conflict. Elsewhere, a young man senses the tremor and turns his head in alarm. He recognizes the overwhelming surge of mana coming from the direction of the plaza. High in a building, observers watch the chaos and realize Raid is the cause. The witnesses gaze out over the rooftops as the scale of the disturbance becomes clear. Smoke and fractured stone mark the site where the lethal energy struck the ground. The standoff continues in the center of the square, under the heavy silence of the aftermath. Nito calls out Toe's name in surprise as she steps forward to intervene. Raid expresses genuine amusement that Toe managed to block his sudden strike. The scythe wielder stops to ask for the identity of the person who countered him. Toe boldly shouts that she is the one who took down the powerful beast. A moment of heavy silence passes as the assassin stares at her with disbelief. He breaks into hysterical laughter, finding the idea of her being the killer absurd. Nito observes the man closely, confused by the complete lack of magic coming from him. The villainous fighter swings his scythe again, claiming he feels incredible power from her. His eyes widen with madness as his cackling echoes through the battle-torn square. Toa struggles to deflect a rapid flurry of strikes that hem her in. Nito attempts to help, but Toa insists she is fine and tells him to stay back. The assassin closes the distance instantly, mocking Toa for momentarily losing her focus. He unleashes a devastating circular sweep of his scythe that ripples through the air. Toa barely evades a massive shadowy strike that crushes the ground behind her. She grits her teeth and readies her sword with renewed determination. Raid vaults away as Toe's counterattack creates a violent shockwave across the plaza. Landing with feline grace, the killer admits the fight is becoming quite interesting. Toe catches her breath, clearly feeling the physical strain of the high-speed combat. A jagged spike of dark energy erupts from a magic circle on the pavement. Raid activates a card and becomes engulfed in a terrifying mantle of fire armor. Sierra watches in horror as she realizes the assassin is finally using his magic. Wreathed in flames, Raid charges forward to initiate the second round of the duel. He moves with blurring speed, leaving a trail of scorched earth in his wake. The two combatants clash in a shower of sparks and violent energy. Toe winces as the searing heat of the assassin's aura grazes her face. Nito calls out her name again, but she remains focused on the enemy. Raid flashes a predatory grin, demanding to know why she is holding back. He ridicules her blunt blade while swinging his scythe with lethal precision. The madman screams for Toe to unleash her true magic in full power. A violent flash of energy erupts as the duel reaches its peak. Toe declares that she is finally unleashing her full power against her foe. Raid scoffs and maintains his distance while bracing for her next move. A massive shockwave carves a deep furrow across the stone ground of the plaza. Toa stares her opponent down with bloodied features and unwavering resolve. The assassin prepares a final, lethal strike to bring the fight to a conclusion. She gasps in realization as the overwhelming pressure of his attack nears her. Nito watches the escalating danger with a look of pure dread and concern. Suddenly, a mysterious tall man intervenes and effortlessly stops both combatants in their tracks. Toe remains frozen in shock by the stranger's immense power and sudden appearance. Nito and Sierra look on in bewilderment at the interruption of the deadly duel. The newcomer Reinhardt demands an explanation for the chaos while pinning the scythe. Raid grimaces in frustration as his bloodlust is forcibly quelled by his superior. Nito rushes to Toa's side and immediately activates a powerful healing aura. The soothing light of the magic washes over Toa's face and eyes. Nito gently reassures her that his magic will prevent any permanent scarring. As the group settles, Nito questions why she refrained from using her magic. Toe somberly admits that her destructive spells would have leveled the entire area. Red turns to Reinhardt and specifically identifies Toa as their primary target. The killer accuses the warrior of being the one who destroyed the Newt Kalane. Raid reacts with aggressive confusion when Reinhardt dismisses the significance of their target's identity. Reinhardt calmly explains that killing a monster on request doesn't necessarily make her an enemy. The assassin shouts in protest, insisting that Toe is clearly hiding something by running away. Turning his attention elsewhere, Reinhardt questions if the young man just performed high-level healing magic. Nito confirms his identity as a healer with a steady and unfazed expression. Leaning in with a menacing grin, Raid mocks the idea of a healer being present. The killer laughs hysterically at the perceived weakness of a man with no detectable power. He continues to sneer at the group, insulting Toa for having such a useless partner. Nito stares back while remembering Saiki, noting the striking similarity in the assassin's arrogant attitude. Maintaining a cold silence, the healer watches his opponent without showing any signs of fear. Reinhardt looks puzzled and asks his comrade if he really can't sense Nito's strength. Nito remains perfectly still as the pressure in the air begins to shift rapidly. A look of absolute horror washes over Reinhardt's face as he perceives Nito's true nature. Raid calls out to his frozen leader while readying himself for another attack. The assassin tells his hesitant superior to stay back if he refuses to finish the job. His scythe drags along the stone tiles as he explains his philosophy on removing threats. Raid lunges forward with a lethal swing, declaring his strike is for the country's sake. Reinhardt screams for him to stop at the top of his lungs in a panic. Nito watches the incoming blade with calm eyes as Reinhardt realizes who he truly is. A massive cloud of dust and shattered stone explodes across the plaza as the blow lands. A massive plume of dust hangs over the shattered cobblestone street where the impact occurred. Reinhardt stands at the edge of the crater in disbelief while the smoke begins to dissipate. A faint silhouette starts to materialize through the thick white haze filling the air. The figure becomes increasingly distinct as the dust settles around the center of the blast. Nito reveals himself to be completely unscathed, standing calmly amidst the ruins of the plaza. Raid lies defeated and unconscious among the broken stone tiles a few feet away. Sweat beads on Reinhardt's forehead as a look of pure dread overcomes his features. He gasps in realization while staring at the young man who stands before him. Reinhardt shouts that the person in front of him is the one who slew the high-threat monster. Toe and her friend rush toward the scene while calling out for the night to stop. The commander's eyes widen as he notices how far the girls have been displaced. Looking back with concern, Toei and her companion find themselves at a safe distance from the crater. Reinhardt processes the fact that Nito relocated them and countered Raid in a single moment. Toe explains that the healer only acted to protect her from the assassin's lethal strike. Gripping his blade tightly, Reinhardt realizes his body reacted out of sheer survival instinct. The knight begins to lower his sword and offers an apology for his sudden aggression. Nito questions if his identity as the monster's killer was obvious from the very start. Reinhardt mentions that his partner was unable to detect any magical energy from him. He reflects on the rule that every living being possesses a trace of magic power. The knight concludes that a lack of presence only happens when someone's power is immeasurably high. Reinhardt explains that Nito's magic power is so vast that it remained completely undetectable to them. Glancing down at the unconscious Raid, the knight offers his sincere apologies for the earlier attack. Nito maintains a stoic expression while clarifying that he and his companions wish to avoid unwanted attention. Toe and her companion watch from the crater's rim as the group's desire for normalcy is expressed. The commander stands amidst the rubble and agrees to handle the official report for the king. He proposes a plan to attribute the monster's death to Sierra to protect Nito's anonymity. Nito observes the knight's sincerity and concludes that this man is someone he can truly trust. Reinhardt prepares to depart and reaches down to retrieve his fallen comrade from the debris. He confirms Nito's name and expresses his regret for the complications that occurred during their meeting. The knight carries Raid away over his shoulder while promising that they will meet again someday. The tension in the air dissipates while white clouds drift slowly across the vast and silent sky. Toa and her friend make their way down the steep slope of the crater to rejoin Nito. Nito stares at his hand and sighs with the realization that he likely went too far. A brief memory surfaces of the moment his single strike devastated the plaza and defeated Raid. The grand architecture of the royal castle stands tall under a bright and cloud-filled sky. Within the palace corridors, a bald man accompanies Reinhardt while mentioning a surge of incoming reports. Reinhardt turns to his colleague who asks if any new information was gleaned from the mission. The men continue walking as they discuss the struggle to reconstruct the remains of the defeated monster. The knight suddenly stops as the man reveals that the creature was actually hollow on the inside. Reinhardt looks back with a furrowed brow and asks for the exact meaning behind that unsettling discovery. The autopsy team discovers the creature is unnaturally thin and lacks any internal organs, leading the investigators to conclude the beast was already dead from the very start. Reinhardt processes this chilling information with a look of growing concern, suggesting that a mysterious figure is manipulating events from behind the scenes. The two men stand in the quiet hallway, pondering the impossibility of controlling such monsters. While the bald official warns that this incident is likely just the beginning, they decide that a thorough investigation of the forest must happen immediately. As Reinhardt receives full authority to lead the specialized investigation team, the commander stares off with a heavy heart and a bad premonition. Elsewhere, a peaceful-looking town remains unaware of the looming unknown danger. Patrons in a lively tavern drink and laugh while two mysterious hooded figures watch. A sinister grin forms on one of the strangers as they move toward the capital. Meanwhile, Nito and his friends arrive at a massive iron gate after being invited. The group walks through a beautifully manicured garden toward a grand manor. They finally reach the imposing entrance of the prestigious Eckerlat residence. A decadent feast is served as Nito sits with Sierra's wealthy parents. He admits his surprise at her noble status, while Sierra bashfully rejects her title. Brownie Carlet looks at the young man and expresses his curiosity about their meeting. The father mentions that Sierra spoke highly of him and his many exploits. Maria joins in by asking about the stories of his strength and heroics at Tanya village. Toa subtly turns her head to steal a quick glance at Nito during the formal dinner. Nito shoots her an irritated look as he suspects her of being far too talkative. The atmosphere shifts suddenly when the dining room door swings open to reveal a visitor. An elegant woman named Hilda enters the room and is warmly greeted by the family. Maria introduces Masamune and Toa as Sierra's close friends and honored guests for the evening. With a charming smile, Hilda leans forward and reveals that she is actually Sierra's older sister. Nito finds himself momentarily dazed and flustered by the older sister's striking presence. Noticing his reaction, Toe casts a sharp glare at him while he begins to sweat nervously. The table remains laden with a variety of gourmet dishes meant for the prestigious feast. A silver fork is pressed firmly into a tender piece of meat during the refined meal. Hilda enjoys the food with a serene expression, appearing completely at ease among the group. Meanwhile, Nito grows internally concerned about how much she might know regarding his true identity. He recalls a fleeting memory of a rider in the forest who resembled the woman before him. Turning his attention back to the table, Nito prepares to ask Hilda a direct question. Sierra proudly explains that her older sister also serves as one of the White King's knights. This revelation makes Nito worry that his most guarded secrets might already be common knowledge. He offers a polite compliment about how impressive it is for two siblings to reach such high status. The conversation continues over the remains of the meal as utensils are set aside. The entire group settles into a long discussion while surrounded by luxury and fine wine. A memory surfaces of the two sisters training hard with wooden swords since their early childhood. Hilda notes that while talent is common, the situation is entirely different when it comes to Reinhardt. Describing a prodigy who was selected as a White King's Knight at the young age of 12, yet she quickly shifts her focus to compare this legendary figure directly to Masamune, suggesting with a piercing gaze that the young man before her might not appear talented initially, which sends Masamune into a cold sweat as he desperately wonders how much she truly knows. Until Sierra suddenly shouts at her sister to stop staring at her guest so intensely, warning Masamune with a frantic expression that he must remain on high alert around her, because she views her older sibling as a predatory snake who never lets her targets go. Though Hilda remains unbothered and teases Sierra about whether the boy is actually her boyfriend, deciding to seize the moment by preparing to ask a very blunt and personal question, which leaves both youngsters in absolute shock when she asks Masamune his true feelings for Sierra, prompting Sierra to explode in a blushing rage over the sudden change in the conversation's direction. While Masamune watches the sibling banter with a nervous smile and realizes they get along well, a loud thud echoes through the room as a heavy object is slammed against the dinner table, revealing Toei standing up with her head down while clutching a bottle of expensive wine, and Masamune looks on with concern as he realizes his companion has become completely intoxicated, until a very flushed Toe sways on her feet and demands to speak her mind to Sierra, beginning a bold and slurred declaration about Masamune, while barely able to keep her eyes open, causing the others to jump up in a panic to prevent the drunken girl from falling, as Toei staggers and sways while Masamune questions just how many bottles she managed to finish. Hilda rests her chin on her hand with a subtle, observant smile, watching Sierra lose her temper and demand that the teasing stop immediately. While Masamune struggles to support the weight of the now completely unconscious Toa, Hilda maintains her calm composure as she continues to silently study the young man. The crescent moon shines through the window as the evening's festivities finally conclude. Later, Masamune carries the sleeping girl into a bedroom while Sierra offers an apology. He gently adjusts the covers over the girl as she sleeps soundly. Sierra gazes at the bed and asks why Toa only seems to trust him. Masamune looks away and confesses that he hasn't found the right time to ask. The drunken girl snuggles into her pillow while murmuring Masamune's name in her sleep. A single light illuminates the long, quiet corridor of the massive family mansion. Sierra leads the way to another door and offers him a guest room. Turning back, she tentatively asks if he has any plans for the next day. Masamune reflects on being penniless and decides that staying might be his best option. He formally requests that she teach him how to use a sword tomorrow. A look of pure excitement and joy washes over Sierra as she agrees. She practically runs down the hallway with a cheerful skip in her step. Masamune stares at the empty space, surprised by her sudden display of genuine emotion. Hilda suddenly appears at his shoulder with a mischievous whisper about his reaction. He nearly jumps out of his skin as she casually claims she was just passing by. Hilda leans in to ask if the rumors regarding Raid's defeat are true. Masamune blushes and clarifies that the victory happened as a side effect of his actions. She observes that he likely did it all for the sake of the sleeping toy. While explaining that their bond is obvious to anyone who watches them, she directly points out that Toe has feelings for him, and the sentiment is mutual, prompting Masamune to look away in embarrassment while stuttering a denial. Hilda's expression softens as she wonders aloud if Sierra could be included in his plans. The young man stares back in utter confusion at the unexpected suggestion. She mentions that Sierra has never shown interest in a man or brought guests home before. Looking down, Hilda explains that Sierra is far too earnest and dense to realize her own feelings. She makes a solemn request for him to take Sierra with him upon leaving the country. A brief flashback depicts Sierra standing out among a crowd of hardened soldiers. Hilda confesses her sympathy for a girl who has known nothing but the weight of a sword. Masamune voices his concern about Sierra's duties as a knight and her own personal choice. She tells him that the timing doesn't matter, even if he must take her by force later. A gentle smile crosses her face as she insists this is the best path for her daughter. Masamune finds himself speechless while he considers the magnitude of her plea. Hilda gives him one last warm look to signal the end of their private talk. Silence falls over the mansion as the night sky remains still under the moon. Morning light eventually breaks through the clouds to signal the beginning of a new day. Sunlight streams into the bedroom as someone begins to stir beneath the thick blankets. Masamune opens his eyes and slowly wakes up to the quiet morning light. He suddenly feels a strange warmth and the sensation of someone snuggling against him. Toa smiles gently while lying beside him and offers a cheerful morning greeting. The young man recoils in sheer panic and demands to know why she is in his bed. She explains that she felt lonely waking up alone, while Masamune remains incredibly flustered. Toe tilts her head curiously with her shirt undone and asks if her presence is unwelcome. He sweats profusely and frantically begs her to close her shirt and fix her clothes. A sharp knock at the door interrupts their chaotic morning and catches them off guard. Sierra bursts into the room with a bright smile to greet Masamune for the day. He turns around in a cold sweat as Toe casually returns the greeting from the bed. Sierra's face turns deep red as she begins to shake with visible shock and anger. Masamune looks on in terror, while Toa remains completely unfazed by the growing tension. Sierra starts lecturing him about physical needs while he desperately screams that she has it all wrong. Hilda hides around a corner and grins widely after having orchestrated the entire awkward encounter. The scene transitions to the lush gardens of the mansion under the bright afternoon sun. Sierra instructs Masamune on proper sword stances while Toa watches them from a distance. She praises his quick learning and decides it is time for them to take a short break. Masamune gazes at his training weapon and realizes just how difficult true swordsmanship really is. He grips the hilt tightly and wonders if he can truly master the art of the blade. Masamune asks Sierra about the origins of her training while they rest in the gardens. Sierra recalls her childhood, starting with a wooden sword before eventually moving on to real blades. The conversation shifts to Toa as Masamune wonders when she began her own journey as a warrior. Toa explains that a traumatic encounter with a Leo wolf in the forest led her to learn combat. Sierra reacts with intense shock at the mention of such a legendary and dangerous creature. She describes the beast as a ferocious S-rank monster that few have ever laid eyes upon. Sitting together on the grass, they discuss Toe's father defeating the creature for their castle display. Sierra grows animated while explaining that S-rank monsters are vastly superior to common threats like Newt Kalanes. She emphasizes that an entire army of knights would struggle to bring down such a formidable foe. A restless glint appears in Masamune's eyes as he quietly hopes to encounter one himself. He asks if there are any renowned heroes in the kingdom who have survived an S-rank battle. Sierra considers the possibility that a member of the White King's Knights might have that experience. She mentions that the guild occasionally issues S-rank missions for those daring enough to accept them. While rabbits graze nearby, she notes that the local area is generally too peaceful for such monsters. The discussion turns to how every monster is unique and ranks can shift based on strength. A diagram illustrates how a creature's rank correlates directly with its current power level. Masamune strokes his chin thoughtfully before posing a very specific hypothetical scenario to the group. He questions what rank a level 500 mimic would hold if it were to actually exist. Sierra stares back at him with a bewildered expression, completely thrown by the massive number. She ultimately assumes that a monster of such legendary level would be classified as unranked. Sierra details the ranking system, explaining that unidentified threats are categorized under a special infinite tier. The group concludes that a level 500 monster would be considered unranked by the guild. Looking at a banner, Sierra clarifies that this classification exists simply to keep the records organized. Masamune pauses to reflect, questioning whether such powerful monsters actually exist in their world. To points out that since nobody survives an encounter with one, their existence remains a mystery. A fleeting memory of a colossal, toothy mimic within a dungeon briefly occupies Masamune's thoughts. He considers his past encounters and regrets not asking a certain, knowledgeable elf for more information. As the sun begins to set, the group concludes their training session in the royal gardens. Masamune decides it is time to head to the guild, leading his companions through the city. They walk past various townspeople, while Masamune focuses on his urgent need to earn money. While walking, Toa mentions that she has been wondering about a certain recurring detail. Suddenly, the two women fix Masamune with terrifyingly intense and suspicious glares. He reacts with frantic gestures, adamantly denying that he ever instructed Nemu to call him master. To leans in with a piercing gaze, clearly unconvinced by his panicked attempts at an explanation. Shifting her focus, To asks Nemu directly why she chooses to use that specific title. Nemu beams with joy, explaining that her mother taught her to love the person who saves her. After listening to the girl's pure logic, Sierra and To decide to believe his story. A woman from the town stops to stare at them, appearing completely stunned to see Nemu. Noticing the woman, Nemu raises her hand and excitedly offers to introduce her group. The little girl then triumphantly declares to the lady that Masamune is her master. Sharon stares intensely at Masamune while he mentally prepares for the trouble her questioning might bring. The scene shifts to the clear sky above the city as an explanation begins to unfold. Townspeople pass by the stone exterior of a local shop where a sign hangs over the entrance. Inside the cozy building, Sharon carefully bandages Nemu's arm while the others watch the scene quietly. She affectionately pats the little girl's head and describes Nemu as being like a daughter to her. A dark expression crosses Sharon's face as she contemplates the people who tried to hurt the child. Turning her back to the group, the shopkeeper expresses her sadness at having to say goodbye so soon. Sharon suddenly places a heavy hand on Masamune's shoulder to emphasize her next words. She looks him directly in the eye and acknowledges that Nemu has chosen him as her master. Leaning in with a menacing gaze, she warns him that she will personally punish him if anything happens. Masamune stands paralyzed by her overwhelming parental aura as Nemu watches the exchange with wide eyes. A tall, sophisticated man suddenly enters the shop and announces that he has been searching for Sierra. Sierra identifies the newcomer as Edward, who remarks on her current choice of public appearance. Adjusting his monocle, the man explains that his formal attire prevents anyone from suspecting his true identity. He shifts his attention to the rest of the group and asks Sierra to identify her companions. Sierra complies by introducing Masamune to the dapper gentleman standing before them. She continues the introduction by presenting Toa as one of their traveling partners. The girl also identifies Nemu for the visitor as he observes the group closely. Edward's eye narrows as he connects the faces before him to the rumors he has heard. He offers a formal bow and introduces himself as Edward Scotch, a knight serving the White King. Sierra asks Edward why he went through such lengths to find her. The knight responds by handing over a scroll sent directly from Reinhardt. Confusion clouds her face as she accepts the mysterious document. She takes a silent moment to steady herself before unfolding the paper. A look of pure astonishment takes hold as she reads the message. Edward confirms that the scroll is actually a formal request from the king. A horrifying image of a basilisk looming over a herd of cattle appears. Realizing the danger, Sierra begins to sweat while processing the report. Toa turns around to ask for clarification on the creature mentioned. Little Nemu chimes in with excitement about her knowledge of the giant snake. Staring back at the paper, Sierra questions why the king chose her. The dapper knight explains that his only duty was to deliver the command. Sharon interrupts the heavy atmosphere to ask the group for a favor. She illustrates her need for the monster's tear glands and poison sacs. The shopkeeper beams with a wide smile as Sierra looks on skeptically. Masamun offers his assistance for the hunt, and To joins in immediately. Sierra looks at her companions with surprise at their sudden determination. The healer notes that he wants to finally repay her for her kindness. Sharon surprises everyone by suggesting that Nemu joins the dangerous expedition. Masamun flinches in shock at the prospect of putting a child in danger. Nemu looks up at Masamun with watery eyes, pleading not to be left behind. Masamun explains the danger of the monster hunt, while Nemu insists on being helpful to him. Sharon intervenes to reveal that Nemu is actually a strong healer famous in the local area. The young cat girl continues her intense, tearful stare until Masamun begins to feel the pressure. He finally relents by allowing her to join the mission for just this one specific occasion. Soon the group sets off across the countryside in a wooden carriage pulled by horses. Staring ahead with narrowed eyes, Sierra internally complains about the king's demanding nature. She vents her frustration to the group about being personally summoned for a mere basilisk hunt. The carriage travels through a wide valley while Masamun attempts to soothe Sierra's mounting annoyance. Toa and Sierra turn their attention toward Nemu as the conversation shifts to her abilities. Sierra curiously asks the child what kind of magic she is capable of performing. Nemu cheerfully admits her lack of magic but mentions a technique called cat fist instead. Masamun expresses his confusion at the unfamiliar term, prompting a shocked reaction from the girl. Jumping to her feet, Nemu prepares to give her master a thorough explanation of her power. She raises a finger high with an air of absolute authority and pride. Toa and Masamun lean in with genuine interest to hear the details of the secret technique. The little cat girl strikes a heroic pose in the center of the carriage floor. Her confidence suddenly evaporates as she admits she does not actually know much about the art. Masamun wears a blank expression while his companions chuckle nervously at the anticlimactic reveal. Nemu concludes by explaining that it is a traditional beast art passed down among cat folks. Sierra clarifies that the technique is a form of martial arts popular among the beast folk. Toa adds that while the name changes by race, it is known as cat fist in Nemu's village. Masamun confirms that the young girl currently possesses no magical abilities of her own. Nemu asserts her status as a cat wizard. Believing she can master magic with enough study, Sierra reveals that the Cat Wizard class is a prestigious, inborn title restricted to catfolk. Curious about the system, Masamune asks if certain character classes are not predetermined by birth. Sierra uses her own growth from a knight to an elite knight as an example of advancement. Masamune hopes for progress as well, asking if he can eventually become a priest. The mood turns somber as Sierra explains that the priest class is also an inborn specialty. She displays a detailed chart proving that the healer class has no established advancement path. Masamun falls into a brief depression upon realizing he is destined to remain a healer forever. Noticing his sudden change in mood, Nemu asks for confirmation regarding his role as a healer. Masamun admits his limitations, stating he is only capable of performing recovery and support spells. Reaching out a hand, Nemu tells her master not to be saddened by his circumstances. She offers encouragement by promising to protect him and insisting that he is strong. Masamun looks at the small child with a soft smile, touched by her unwavering support. As the carriage continues its journey, Nemu inquires about when they will reach the town of Wick. Sierra estimates they will arrive tomorrow, which necessitates spending a full night inside the vehicle. Masamun voices a sudden concern regarding whether they left the capital without proper notification. Sierra provides reassurance by explaining that she has already sent word to her superiors and colleagues. Masamun recalls seeing Sierra whispering to her ring during their journey yesterday, inquiring if the accessory serves as a tool for long-distance communication. Sierra confirms its function and notes that all White King's knights carry one. Reaching into his robes, Masamun produces a similar ring of his own. He admits a mysterious individual gave it to him, but he has yet to test it. Sierra mentions that her standard-issue ring only operates within the kingdom's borders. Masamun asks if his version might work further away as the giver previously suggested. Squinting at the jewelry, Sierra notes its exceptionally high purity and expensive craftsmanship. To asks for more details regarding the person who handed over such a prize. Masamun describes an erratic individual who attacked him before offering a sudden invitation. He remembers the man's overwhelming aura of hostility and the magic fired at his back. The mysterious figure spoke of being in an organization and gave the ring as a token. Sierra and Toa lean in closer, asking for the name of this suspicious group. The mention of Dragon's Heart causes Sierra to recoil in visible shock. Trembling slightly, she asks her master if he is absolutely certain about that name. She explains that the organization is legendary and feared by almost everyone. Their history involves killing high-ranking politicians and attracting international bounties for their deeds. Masamune notes that the man's talk of eradicating corruption fits their notorious profile. Sierra brings up the Toyrant Kingdom incident as the source of their worldwide fame. She recounts the horrific genocide ordered by Queen Priva against her own population. Masamune realizes the organization didn't just target the queen, but everyone connected to her. A gruesome vision of a blood-stained palace hall reveals that they even slaughtered innocent children. Turning toward his other companion, he asks Toa if she is familiar with the incident as well. Toa recalls overhearing her father discuss an acquaintance named Carpent, who founded the Dragon's Heart. Sierra watches him closely, questioning how he intends to respond to such a dangerous invitation. Looking down in contemplation, Masamune admits that he has not yet made a final decision. He notes that since he doesn't know when they will meet again, the matter is secondary. The conversation settles as they decide it is pointless to worry about an uncertain future encounter. Their carriage continues its steady journey along a sun-dappled path through the lush green forest. Masamune stares out the window, recalling the mysterious group's mention of traveling to Grey Belka. The towering white walls of the Grey Belka kingdom eventually come into view against the horizon. Reaching the border checkpoint, two armored guards stand ready with spears to greet all newcomers. One sentry steps forward aggressively, thrusting his spear out while shouting for the party to halt. The guard barks a harsh command for the lead traveler to remove their hood and reveal their face. Three cloaked figures stand motionless before the gate, their expressions hidden beneath deep shadows. A single sharp eye glints from beneath a hood as the guard repeats his demand with growing impatience.